I'm going to do a quick review over the last two talks. The first talk really is going to be key to understanding the process after death, and I'm going to go a little bit more into describing the different dimensions of the astral and the different levels of the mental plane, which I really only touched upon in the first talk. But we really need, get my words out properly, to know those levels and those dimensions in more detail this time. So I'm going to go into that now. So do we all remember where we started? Talk 1, 7 o'clock, 2 weeks ago. So if I come around the other side. Basically we're looking at the absolute, what is known as the absolute to the ancients, particularly to the Theosophists and the Vedantists. This is described really as that which cannot be known, that which cannot be described. It is void, empty, beyond comprehension. There is no movement, no shape, colour, light or form. And yet there is an impulse that is born in the absolute to create and to know himself or herself, depending on how you define that. So out of the absolute came what we would know in ancient philosophy, ancient culture as the logos. Who's heard of this term logos? Okay. The correspondence of this logos in this system is the sun disk itself. This is the logos for our solar system. You might say this is our local God. And it's the manifestation, you might say, of the masculine, this fiery disk. So this logos is manifest at all levels. At all levels. The universe is what you could describe as a hologram or holographic. There's an old Hermetic saying, I think, goes along the lines of as above, so below, as below, so above. And this really describes this holographic universe, this fractal universe. I'm sure we've all come across that. So at the highest level this is manifesting, and it also manifests at the very individual personal level as well, and everything in between. Solar systems, galaxies included. Okay? So we're looking at the first outpouring from the absolute, which is the logos, or the masculine aspect. This aspect is male, it's active, it's dynamic, and we often refer to this as consciousness. There's a second outpouring, which we often refer to as the goddess, which in this system is associated with the lunar aspect or the moon. So we have the solar and lunar aspects at the solar system level, but really in terms of how we relate to it, it's in terms of matter and energy. Remember this from the first talk? Yeah? Matter and energy commingle and they mix to create all the various different levels of consciousness. All the levels of consciousness. I've got from 1 to 9 here. At the lowest level, matter is most dense. It is at its slowest and heaviest. It's the darkest level. And then there's a gradation, you might say, through all these dimensions, which we'll look at today, to the very highest level, which hardly has any matter or energy, but really is only just pure consciousness and light. Yeah? The accumulation of all of this, in terms of its purpose, its impulse, and its intent, really is for God to know himself or herself. And that focus becomes acute and very clean and clear at this level only, which is human consciousness. It's at this level as human beings that we have almost a perfectly polished mirror. And we can actually reflect and we can actually see our own true nature. And we define that by that which is not. Remember from last week? That which is not is the world of samskars. So, who remembers what a samskar is? It's not just you that was asleep, Adrian, apparently. It's everybody. Okay.
Well, I remember it as a scar.
As a scar, yeah. It's in the word, isn't it? It's a scar. It's literally an imprint.
Yeah.
See, consciousness will descend through, we will discover soon, the mental planes into the astral world. And these are all realms of light. But it will only descend as far as the astral, or the lower astral. That as far as our consciousness will drop. The other aspect, which is matter and energy, rises. And that creates our physical body, and eventually rises up beyond the physical realm into a slightly subtle realm, an energy realm, called the etheric, which is our chi body, or chi force, remember? That is as far as the feminine rises. So the masculine comes down to the astral, the feminine rises through the physical and etheric envelopes, and there they meet as a human being. Yeah? So this is at this level here, what we call the third dimension. And it's at this level really that we become imprinted, or at least our light body becomes imprinted, which is the astral body. So at the higher dimensions we are light, and this is our true nature. And that light actually expresses our truth of being who we actually are. But at the astral level the opposite happens. Because when light becomes very dense and light becomes very slow as we come down the dimensions, grab a chair at the back there, yeah. As light becomes very dense and very slow, it becomes capable of receiving imprints from the physical nervous system. The physical nervous system. And these are our scars and our wounds. The first imprint being the shock or the trauma of birth itself. The first imprint being the imprint of separation from source, separation from life, separation from light and bliss and love. So we're suddenly thrust in terms of our consciousness into this physical vehicle, into this central nervous system, and we are then cut off from our higher nature. And we experience this as a stepping down 7 energies. We come down through each gateway energy down into the spinal nerve, down into the spinal column. So we did this last week, we remember this? Yeah? So as consciousness starts to descend, it hits the crown chakra first. There's a gateway, you might say, in the axis or the spine, like a trap door. So once consciousness penetrates this gateway, it closes behind it. And this is the same for all the chakras. The actual disc or the wheel that we associate with the chakra is actually an expression of the chakra from this central axis. It's an energy expression. It's not the chakra itself. The chakra is a gateway within the central axis, which is called the Sushumna. Remember from last week? So this gateway, it closes behind the descending consciousness. So we come in and we hit the crown and we lose our connection to cosmic consciousness, the feeling of being one with everything. And then we drop even further. We hit the third eye gateway. And then we lose our capacity to enter into the inner world, and our universe becomes inverted. What was our natural environment in terms of the astral world now disappears as we plug into the physical senses, which now becomes acutely aware to us at the level of our third eye. Then we drop down into the throat gateway, and we lose our capacity at that level to manifest through our thoughts and through our intentions immediately. We no longer are able to create with light and energy directly. We lose the ability at the level of this manifestation center here, the 5th chakra. Then we drop down past the heart level, and then we're closed off to universal love. So then we feel completely bereft and completely abandoned by God and life as we disconnect from that feeling. And then we drop down into the solar plexus center, and that gateway closes behind us and locks us in. And that is all about our use of will, in terms of actually it's my will rather than thy will be done. Can you see? So thy will, I don't care about that anymore. I've forgotten about that. I'm just going to develop my own little will and just do my own thing from this point on. And then we drop down into the sacral center and we lose our joyousness, our capacity for adventure, the feeling for life and joy and the movement through this world. We lose that. We seal off to that feeling of connection with fellow human beings and our sexuality, that intimate connection with higher consciousness, that inner sacred sexual connection is lost. And then we drop down into our root center. And that gateway finally closes behind us and we're born, where we finally cannot even survive. We don't even know, and we have safety and security issues because we're just a tiny little baby. We're completely 100% dependent. And we have to start to activate that chakra over the next 7, 14, 21 years in order that we can find our footing in this world and we can actually survive, and then we can feel safe and secure. And from that point on, we start the journey back. And now the whole reason and the whole point of this is that the journey up the spine, which is only just a distance of maybe about 1 meter, can possibly take us as human beings maybe millions of years to travel that distance of 1 meter on our journey back from the root to the crown. Spread over perhaps hundreds, if not thousands, of human lifetimes. It's a very, very short distance. So you can see we're travelling at an absolute snail's pace. In fact, a snail would actually, by comparison, be seen maybe as a supersonic jet in terms of its sheer velocity. Yeah, it seems like it's quite slow in terms of unfolding. But literally we are travelling from our sacrum to our crown. And it's the reverse of every birth. It's the reverse process. Paramahamsa Yogananda often used to point to this. He said that is all we are looking to do. We're looking to travel this 1 meter. 1 meter. I'm going to go into the realms and dimensions, except where did I put my little poster? Is it over here now? Yes, it's here, sorry. Because I don't have enough space, I'm having to double up on space. I forgot what I tucked away. Okay, so I'm going to go into the different realms and dimensions. We looked very briefly last week at the fact that we are triune. We are threefold in our nature. Who remembers about this? For example, we have a spirit, we have a soul, and we have a body. There's 3 aspects to us. And every individual human being has these 3 aspects, right? But each one of these aspects is also triune. So there's 3, 3, and 3. So there are 3 aspects to spirit, there are 3 aspects to the soul, and there are 3 aspects to our physicality. So I'm going to quickly touch upon that, because again we looked at this last week, but it's very important we know about this, because this defines a lot in terms of our afterlife or after-death experience. So the first aspect really, remember we were talking about the monad. The monad really is the expression of God. This, what is often referred to as the spark of the divine. The ancients used to often refer to this as a ray. There are 7 rays in ancient philosophy and ancient understanding, and we're going to get into that when I do a series of talk on the 7 rays and 7-ray psychology in the summer. In the summer, yeah, I think. So we're going to do that then. I've got that talk already planned, and we'll be looking at that. So I won't go into that now, but just know that we're all, each and every one of us, an aspect or a spark or a fragment of the divine Godhead, that which cannot be described. This spark is known as the monad, and it has 3 qualities, and I've listed them here. The first one is will. This is the impulse for life, the will aspect, at the higher divine level. So this is the will, or the impulse to know thyself, or for God to know thyself, as expressed at the individual level of the monad. The will to create, and the will to reflect, and to become self-aware. The second aspect is love. This is the foundation of reality at all levels, love. This is our connection with unity consciousness, our connection with the one. And yet we are distinct, and yet we are connected. So this is the feeling of love that permeates everything. And the third aspect is wisdom. Gnosis, as the Greeks would call this. A knowing of our divine nature. There is no doubt who we are at that level, because we are that in truth. There are no masks. There is no way to hide from yourself. You stand naked, you might say, at this level in the light of God. And you know yourself. From that, we manifest, you might say, the soul, which I like to call really the causal body, also known in New Age vernacular as the higher nature or the higher self. And we're all familiar with that, as distinct from the monad and the spirit. So each one of these aspects is projected down into the next level of consciousness. Let me move it over here so you guys can see. Yep. If I come over here, that's easy. So from the spirit, we get the creation of the causal body, or the higher self, or what is known as the soul. So what happens is the monad, or the spirit, extends a fragment of itself, like you might say, a fragment of light, or a thread of consciousness. It extends that, and it creates this level here, what's called the atmic level of consciousness. Well, the Buddhists have come to call nirvana. So from the will aspect, we create what's called the Atman. Very common term in Sanskrit, Atman or Atma. Who's heard of Atman or Atma? Yeah. This, you might say, defines our individual intent as a spiritual being. And it also defines this level of consciousness here, which is the atmic realm, or nirvana. And we'll get to that a little later in terms of describing what happens at this level of consciousness, because we need to understand that as part of the after-death experience, which we will get to. But just understand at the moment that as an expression of the monad, we create a realm of consciousness which is to do with will, and the expression of divine will called the Atma or the Atman. Out of that, there's another thread that continues its journey down, which extends itself to this plane called the Buddhi plane. This plane here is called the intuitional plane. And this really is our feeling plane at a higher level. What in Sanskrit we often refer to as the Vijnanamaya Kosha, or that aspect of us which feels and knows the truth of who we are. See, at this level, it's the feeling that is paramount. It corresponds to this love aspect of the monad. And this is the feeling for who we are, and the feeling for everybody else, and their truth, and their nature. So here we have the Atman, which is the will, the impulse, the intent to create. And then we have the feeling of love, which is Buddhi or Nirvana. And then the last aspect of the causal body or the higher self to manifest is what's called manas in Sanskrit. It literally means higher mind. So another thread of consciousness extends itself out from Buddhi into manas, which is our abstract mind, our conceptual mind, our philosophical mind. It's the higher mind. Those three things together, Atma, Buddhi and Manas, which really are a reflection of will, wisdom and love, comprise the soul. This is the soul that's referred to in the Bible and in most religions and cultures on this planet. I call it the causal body, and we'll soon understand why that is the way that it is. But I'm sure we're all familiar with the term higher self, right? So this is our higher self. This is our higher consciousness. This consciousness is born once, and it dies once. But from the causal body, we have an extension, again, through a thread of light that comes down into the lower mental plane that creates our concrete thoughts. The thoughts, usually, that we're familiar with here on earth in terms of our daily thinking processes. That's the concrete mind. From that level, we get an extension again of a thread of light that then extends further down into the astral plane, the astral world, which really you could say is our impulse body or our desire body, the astral body. And then we get a final thread of light that extends further into the physical etheric. And that, as we know, is the physical body, which we're all very, very familiar with. And that comprises the personality or the false ego. So we have will, wisdom, love at the spirit level, which then becomes Atmic, Buddhi and Manas at the soul level, which then becomes mental, astral, emotional, etheric, physical at the egoic personality level. Okay? And each of these has its own realm of expression, its own level of consciousness, which we will journey through on the way down into incarnation and on the way back after we've been born. So we have Atma, Buddhi, and then we have Manas. Now Manas is mental, and you might see that this realm here, I don't know if everyone can see, but this realm is divided in two. So we have the upper mind and we have the lower mind. So the Atma, Buddhi and Manas comprise the soul, and then from there we get an expression which is the lower mind, and then into the emotional and into the physical realms. Let's move this up here so you can see this clearly.
There are two words there that you didn't explain.
Yes.
And the one that you just covered it.
Oh,
Sutra.
okay.
Sutrama.
Sorry, Chrissy, yeah, which ones?
Sutrama.
I will get to that. Yeah, I will get to that. I just want to really get across that there are 7 levels of consciousness. There are 7 realms of expression. And we all are connected intimately with all of these levels. We are one with all these levels of consciousness at the same time. We exist at this level. We exist here, 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 and here, simultaneously. And all these realms exist within us and around us as what we would call the aura, or our field of energy. Yeah? They occupy the same space and same time. So they're all here simultaneously. The universe, you might say, is really divided into 7 dimensions or 7 realms. And this is common in terms of Vedic and in terms of theosophical and ancient understanding. These 7 levels of consciousness, 7 chakras, 7 levels of consciousness, 7 layers to our body in terms of the aura. So the number 3 is always very keen and very keenly expressed and very, very fundamental in terms of ancient understanding. But the number 7 also likewise. It's a very, very important number. 3, then 7. So from the 1 comes the 2, from the 2 comes the 3, from the 3 comes the 7. These are the 7 levels of consciousness. Each of these levels contains another 7 levels. Each, another 7. So you've got 7 inside of 7. It's getting a bit complicated now. But you can understand altogether then you'll have 49. Can you see? But roughly speaking, they fall into 2 groups. So every level of consciousness or every plane of existence is, broadly speaking, first of all divided in half. And then it's divided into 7. So you either have 3 and then 4, or you have 4 and then 3. Now the reason why I'm mentioning that now is because there's a unique division that happens at the level of the mental plane. The mental plane has an upper mental and a lower mental. The upper mental is part of the soul, triad, and the lower mental is part of the personality, triad. So the causal body, or the soul, really has what you might call the manas, or the upper mental here, and then the mental is also here at the lower level of that realm. So in that one dimension you have the upper mind and the lower mind. Yeah, you understand that? Can you see? Yeah, very important. That's a very important distinction because this forms the connection to the soul, and also it forms the connection to our physical ego at the level of our mental mind. Okay, now that's a quick recap of last week, and I've added some extra stuff there, right? Okay, because what I wanted to do was to get into the detail really of all of this. Just very, very quickly before we move on, we can also see at the emotional or astral level we have a higher emotional and a lower emotional. So we have higher desires and lower, more gross desires. And we can feel that in our bodies, and we can feel that in our lives here on earth. We can have aspiration, which takes us high, and then we can have just desires for gross sensual enjoyment, which is a very low, heavy vibration. And then we have here at the level of the physical incarnation, we have the etheric, which is the very fine substance, the energy body, and then we have the body that's made of matter, this physical machine made of the elements of physicality. So this realm also is split in half and is divided. And every realm is divided. There's a division at every level of this hierarchy into 2 and 7 at the same time. Are we all okay with that? I'm not going to go any further with that because I don't want to get too heady. It gets heady enough.
Can I just ask you just come right to the bottom on the physical then?
Yeah.
How would you divide up the physical?
With the physical, we have the solid, liquid, and gas, which are considered to be sub-levels of the physical.
Right. Yeah.
And then we have 4 levels of the etheric. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just above us, we have the astral world, which is comprised of 7 subplanes. 3 subplanes. The first 3 are very closely associated in our earthly life, and then the 4 upper subplanes are more associated with the next level up.
Okay.
Yeah, and in the mental level, as I've described, we have 4 subplanes, then there's a divide, and then we have the 3 upper subplanes which comprise the higher mind.
Can I ask you another question?
Yes?
Sorry.
Yes, of course.
Elements. The
Elements, yes, that's down here at the
elements.
matter level.
Now, as in earth, air, fire, water, ether.
Yeah.
Would you subdivide those within each plane?
I don't know,
Okay.
I'm not sure. Each plane will have its corresponding elements,
Yeah.
just like we have our elements here on Earth. In
Yeah.
fact, the lower astral realms are very similar to life here on Earth in terms of their look and feel,
Yeah.
very similar. So definitely there are elements there that comprise that physical reality.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah. You okay with that? Yeah, I don't
That's
I don't know how I would categorise them though.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. Chrissy?
I've thought about this. Don't water and earth correspond to the liquid, the solid and the gas?
Yeah.
And fire is like energy, really.
Yeah, it's closer to the etheric. Yeah, it's another way to divide them.
So, wouldn't that be like before they actually discovered all of the individual elements?
Yeah.
And in every ancient system, balanced kind of format of those elements. But I thought maybe, it's interesting, it's earth, water and air, which are actually solid, liquid and gas.
Yes. I have seen that as a division, so you could look at it that way as well.
Yeah.
But you'll always come to 7, which is the key. Yeah, it's the key number and locks the door. Yeah. No matter how you divide it, you'll always find that will be mirrored in many, many ways. This system of 1, 3 and 7. Because it's fundamental at the highest level, so it'll be mirrored into all subsequent levels in all dimensions and realms. Basically what happens here, what happens here, happens here. Yeah. And you remember I was describing that the monad basically extends itself as a filament of light into the atmic, which extends itself into the buddhic as a filament of light. As a filament of light again, it extends itself into the manas. And from the manas, or the causal body, there's another extension of light into the mental, which then extends itself again into the emotional, extends into the physical. So you have this filament of light, which is the point. The ancients called this filament of light the Sutratma. It's our spiritual axis, and it connects us to all dimensions and all realms. Yeah? So we are simultaneously here, and here. All at the same time. And we're operating at all those levels simultaneously in our consciousness. Although when we are locked into the physical nervous system, we become heavily samskared. And it's because of the veil of samskars that we can't feel the connection to the higher realms of consciousness. You remember from last week. Yeah. Now you're right, there was a couple of other terms here. So this one term here, Sutratma, is this thread of light that I've just described that extends through all levels, dimensions and realms. And there's another term here, I'm sure we've heard of the Rainbow Bridge. Who's heard of the Rainbow Bridge? Okay, who knows what this is? Jill, you do, don't you?
Well, my understanding it's a bridge between upper and lower, between
It is,
planes.
yeah. We're going to get to that in a little while. But basically this is the bridge that connects the egoic personality back to the higher consciousness, the higher self, or the causal body. And it's a bridge that we have to work on to build. And that's that bridge that takes perhaps millions of years to construct between our sacrum and our crown. And that is what we're doing. We're looking to go back up the spine. We're looking to rise back up to the causal body. That is what's called the Antakarana in Sanskrit, and what we commonly know as the Rainbow Bridge. Okay, so that's a quick review, and a few extra little bits of information in there about dimensions and realms that we didn't have time to cover last week. So, where do we start this week? First of all, are we all okay with that? We have a basic grasp of these 7 dimensions and levels. So let's start with death. I mean, this is why we're all here tonight, isn't it? To understand what this is about. What happens at the moment of death? So my understanding of this is the first thing that happens is that the Kundalini force, whether it has been awoken or not in one's life, is activated powerfully. So the moment of death, the Kundalini force, which is the feminine energy, awakens. This flashes up the spine, literally flashes up the spine to the crown. This activates the death process. This is the first thing. What we'll experience when we're on our deathbed, however, is a sudden awakening. If we haven't experienced it during the context of our life that's just passed, we will experience it at the moment of death because of the activation of Kundalini. With the sudden awakening of Kundalini, we suddenly have full psychic ability. Full psychic ability and awareness. Our heart chakra will be open, so we'll feel love and we'll feel bliss and we'll feel that connection to the all of life. Our third eye will open, and then we'll suddenly start to see, as it were, the other dimensions and the other realms. Just at the moment of death, it's as if we actually start to pierce the veil of this reality, which in a sense starts to recede from our vision as our consciousness then is pulled out of the central nervous system. It's pulled away from the senses. It's retracted into our causal body eventually, and it's on that journey, it's beginning that journey. And this is an inward journey towards our inner nature, towards who we really are in the inner planes. But that first step, what we will see, is that this physical reality starts to pale away. It becomes like you might call washed out or grey or a bit ghostly. So what is very, very clean and very clearly defined for us, perhaps for maybe 70, 80, 90, 100 years or more, suddenly you start to see the nature of this reality as Maya. The ancients call this world Maya. Have you heard this term? Yeah. It literally means energy, but specifically it means the illusory energy. So we start to penetrate that, and we start to see beyond that, which is into the astral world. So one of the first things we often see when we're on our deathbed is angels, other beings, deceased relatives that have gone before us, because they are in the astral world. And they have come to assist us in terms of our transition. And they often become visible in the room at that time. But unfortunately, because our consciousness is withdrawing from the central nervous system, quite often we do not have the capacity to communicate that because we don't have use of our larynx and our vocal cords. You know, at that point we're pretty much starting our onward journey, our inward journey. The next thing that happens, and this is really fundamental and this is really important, and it has really its foundation in last week's talk, is our astral body, which as we know from last week is built of samskaras, a lifetime of scarification, some of which are very deep, some which are very moderate, and some which are very light. Remember from last week? This astral vehicle is just samskaras, it's an ocean of samskaras. But at the very next moment, after the Kundalini has been activated and risen, that astral body shatters. It fragments. It's almost as if it explodes. Now remember, this is our egoic consciousness. This is our personality. This is who we have so dearly and so fondly attached ourselves to in this physical life. And in that moment, it's gone. Just gone. The surface level is the level that gets distributed most rapidly because it's the lightest. That level gets resolved to astral dust. A little bit like the physical body, when we bury it in the earth, eventually decays into the physical elements. So we have the same phenomena occurs with astral matter and astral atoms. So the lighter material, which is more the conditioned mind, and our conditioning, which is the smaller samskaras, are blown off first. And they resolve into astral dust. And then we have the moderate samskaras. Now there's a theme that can happen here with our moderate samskaras, because these can also be expunged at that time. But one or two things can happen depending upon the consciousness of the individual that's dying. And there are two things that define this. One is our attachment to earthly existence, and two is our beliefs and ideas of what's going to happen to us after we die. The person that's dying, both of these things will have an incredible bearing on where they go next and what happens next. Yeah? You see, if we are very, very, very attached, or if we become overtly attached to physical sensuality and physical existence and ego identification, it'll be very hard to release that ego at the moment of death. The reason is that we'll tend to tenaciously grab on to what is familiar. And there can be a huge battle that's fought, you might say, on the inner level, with our consciousness grasping and holding onto our physical identity, our ego structures. And what it's really doing is embracing and tightening its grip around these samskaras in our astral body. So that will restrict this natural fragmentation that wants to happen at that time, which really is for our upliftment and for our liberation. But it can't happen if that attachment is there. Can you see? On the other hand, if we're not so attached, and we have prepared ourselves spiritually through meditation, through practice, and through higher understanding with our mind, then very easily we can understand, actually this is death, I'm going through this now and I need to let go. And with an attitude of surrender, we can actually release a lot more of these samskaras at that moment of death, which makes our onward journey all the more gracious and much more easier. Can you see that? The other thing that comes into play here is the mental body. Religious beliefs, ideology, our understanding, our concept of reality and who we really are then comes into play. Because if, like an atheist, we think that there's nothing after death, then we're going to really struggle to let go of this life. Can you see? It's not going to be easy to release our limited egoic consciousness, because our beliefs and our conditioned mind will actually hang on again. On the other hand, if we've become educated and we've understood about who we are and what our real nature is, we've taken the time to study ourselves, then at the moment of death that will actually assist us. Because we can actually go, actually this is my egoic consciousness, which is distinct and separate from me and who I really am, so therefore I can let go of that much more easily. There may be still some, wanting to hold on out of fear maybe or whatever, but it's much easier with that understanding in mind. So these two things can cause all kinds of issues and all kinds of problems at the time at which the astral body is actually wanting to release us. There's a tendency perhaps to hold on to denser, heavier ego identification. Now, depending upon what happens there determines what happens next. And that's why it's very, very fundamental. But the key process really during the course of our life, the sojourn that we have here on earth, is to become as enlightened and illuminated as possible, to release as much of the heavier, denser samskaras that we've accumulated during our life, during our earthly life, so that these things do not weigh us down and are not difficult for us to release at the moment of our death. Otherwise they will be. And the heavier and the denser, the more core the samskar, the harder it is for us to release it, because the more core it is, means it's more fundamental to our ego identification. Remember last week, the first samskar usually that comes in is that samskar which is the feeling of separation, that I am alone, that God has abandoned me. That eventually leads to a whole sequence of samskars built on top of that to do with self-loathing, self-hate. Remember that from last week? This forms the root of our egoic consciousness. So those very core samskars are the very last samskars, you might say, to be released in some ways. And yet, if we could do a good job while we're here on earth in terms of becoming enlightened, which literally means to bring more light in, then those samskars hopefully will have already been cleared at the moment of our death, or they're in transition, or we can very easily deal with them because we have been grappling with them our whole life. And therefore it's no problem to release them now. Yes?
Would that be the same for somebody who's heavily medicated, say for months before they die?
In terms of samskarification?
Yeah.
Well, there's a couple of things that come into that, because medication will not have a bearing on this. They will be free. Once the consciousness is extracted from the central nervous system, then the effects of the medication are no longer felt. Do you understand? There is a residue of that, you might say, in the etheric body, but consciousness also then is extracted from the etheric body. It's as if the masculine principle of consciousness is withdrawing from the feminine principle of earth and matter. There's a separation at that time. So the effects and the side effects of all that medication will not be felt. But what is still there, irrespective of the medication, are the samskars that have been accumulated during the course of that life. And there may be some scarification as a result of medication. Can you see? Because the shock of diagnosis, the shock of having an illness, having to endure maybe pain and suffering, and all of that, as a result of a medical condition, can also create, of course, samskars, which then will have to be released. You see? Yeah?
So the mode of death isn't that important then, because you'll still go through the same process.
Yeah, well...
I mean, whether you're under sedation or whether you're hit by a truck.
Oh yes, yes, exactly, yeah. Yeah. It doesn't matter whether you're totally unconscious, you will still more or less go through this process.
Yeah.
This is the mechanics.
Yeah.
You see, when we're in our physical body and we look through our physical senses at this world, we see this world as a very, objective environment. Everything is an object, and there's mechanics, and there are laws that govern this realm. There are laws also that govern the inner realms. And what we experience, you might say, in terms of our psychology, has a form and a structure in the inner world. So what is a samskar, which is just basically an emotional wound or a hurt that we carry within us, if you could see it clairvoyantly, would have features. I've seen this. I've looked at my own samskars inwardly, and I've actually seen these pretty weird looking characters, I have to say. I mean, you wouldn't see anybody looking like this in physical reality, and if you did, they'd have serious problems. I mean, some of them are just faces, they have no bodies. Some of them have bodies, very tiny little forms, but mostly they're quite hideous and twisted and quite distorted. What you might call devilish looks. I mean, this is where we get a lot of that imagery. That we see in churches, and it comes out in the Bible, and all the religious scriptures. They describe these things to us. That imagery is what we're carrying all the time on the inside. That's how our samskars look, like an object looks. And when you die, you get to see them, which actually can be quite scary, actually, because you get to see the whole horde. Because remember, at the astral level, we're not an individual. At an astral level, we're much more a collective or a mob. During the course of our life, this mob, you might say, is kind of held within the astral field, a bit like sheep held within a pen. Yeah? They can't go running off everywhere because they're part of this collective mass of consciousness. But there is a mob. And in that mob of consciousness, some samskars are active and others are dormant. Some are becoming activated and some are actually becoming recessive in their action. And they're all competing with each other all the time. Who's going to be active now? Who's going to be dominating the consciousness now? Yeah, and who isn't? Yeah, remember? So there's this constant churning of the ocean of samskars within our astral field. Every experience we have here on earth is an imprint into the astral. Very light, very moderate, or very deep. But everything is imprinted at that level. It's like this constant recording. At death, everything that is held within the astral body needs to be expunged. It needs to be released. So there is a blessed release at the moment of death. Much of our conditioning and much of our wound and much of our hurt, our egoic consciousness, is released with the shattering of the astral body. It is released. And there'll be fragments that go off into astral space. And as I say, the lighter ones will just dissolve. But the heavier ones that we release will not dissolve. They will maintain their integrity because they have an energy within them that holds them together. They will not dissolve. These fragments become what we call, from our earthly experience, ghosts. Also they're known as entities. These are fragments or samskars, moderate to heavy, that were held within the astral form of a dying person that were released at the moment of death. They were shattered, and that samskar became individualized at that point. It was no longer part of a mob or a collective. It is no longer vying for attention. and it flies out into the astral envelope that surrounds the Earth. Because we all have an astral envelope, but the Earth has an astral envelope as well, which is made up, you might say, of our collective astrality. Yeah? As above, so below. So these fragments fly off into the astral around the Earth. And you know, you often see these are ghosts. And this is why ghosts always tend to do the same repetitive actions at the same places over and over and over again, because that samskara is just a very primitive, very basic recording of an experience on Earth that just gets replayed. But it's not complicated, it doesn't have language, it's not sophisticated, it's just an emotional replay. You often see this in haunted houses. Yeah? There's a ghost, and they think, oh, this is the dead relative come back to visit, right? Wrong! That dead relative is gone on long ago. This is just the astral samskara which is still active within this environment. Now they cannot live for very long. They cannot live for very long because they are an astral fragment. They need etheric energy to feed them. You see, we've separated from our physical etheric body. So the samskaras have gone off separate from the etheric physical component. That's the moment of death, it separates us. So they need etheric energy to maintain their structure and consciousness. To do that, they have to prey on the living. So they have to find a corresponding energy that matches their energy to associate themselves with. This is called the law of correspondence. Like attracts like. So if, for example, someone dies and they were a heavy drinker, let's say an alcoholic, right? There'd be a massive samskara that would be released at the time of their death, perhaps if they would let it go. And we'll get into what happens if they don't let it go in a little while, but let's just assume they managed to release that massive samskara off into the astral environment. That samskara immediately would seek out other alcoholics, and it would find the closest match to that energy and associate with that person. So effectively, it probably, if you want my opinion, would go down to the pub. And it would hang out in the pub and wait for someone to come in that was an exact match, or a very close match. And then it would actually sit inside that person's field as what you would call an entity. But really it's like a vampire. And it's just drawing etheric chi force from that individual. And that's why entities are always draining on the vital force. And the experience is always one, if you've got entities, that you're just always tired. Not to say if you're tired, you've got entities. But let me clarify that. But the very, very common experience with entities is that you will always be having your life force drained from you. You'll be constantly in a state of being vampirized. Can you see that? And they operate exactly like samskaras do, your own samskaras actually, in the astral field, in terms of impulsing you all the time to do certain behaviors, to act in certain ways, in order that they then can be nourished from your emotional response. Remember last time? The activation of the samskaras. So your environment provides a trigger, the emotion is released, but the samskara will always try and steer you towards the trigger so that it can actually express itself. And in that moment of expression, it's as if a huge amount or a huge volley of life force energy enters into the samskara and nourishes it. Can't nourish it when it's sealed up and closed. It has to be open to receive energy. So when it's in its dormant state, it can't be fed. When it's in its open state and it's activated, it's eating. It's feeding. And when its belly is fully full and it feels satiated, it then closes down and goes into a dormant state. Yeah, yeah.
I suppose one thing, I mean, you quoted alcoholics.
Yes.
But I mean, with relatives,
Yeah.
say, you know, if people have had these very sort of codependent relationships with
Yeah.
relatives, is that something that
Totally.
can often happen when
Totally.
they die?
Yeah, totally. See, the closest vibrational match to a samskara usually is a close relative. Usually a close relative. One, because we have a similar DNA inheritance. So we already have a predisposition towards certain behaviors and certain experiences in this life. And as part of a family unit, certainly we'll have a commonality in terms of our experience. There'll be a vibrational match. That's why in India, funerals are always conducted in white. White repels samskars. Black sucks them in like a vacuum cleaner. I don't know why we always go to a funeral here in black. It's absolutely the worst colour if you want to repel samskars. It's the best colour if you want them to stick to you quickly, like a pin cushion. Yeah. So you go to a funeral in black. It's the worst possible colour you could wear. Yeah.
So, Paul, can I just ask then, going back to the entities,
Entities, yes.
yeah, if you clear an entity from somebody,
Yes.
which is very possible to do,
It is.
where
'Cause-
does it go?
well, it goes back into the astral environment,
Yeah,
and unfortunately has to find another.
so it looks for
Correspondence.
someone else. Looks for someone else.
Yeah. It'll either come back in
Right.
or go somewhere else. Usually they come back in,
Yeah.
because it's not difficult to do. Otherwise, if you've closed the door and you've sealed that up
Mm.
properly with energy work, you can do that.
Mhm.
And they can't get back in, then they have to go and find another victim. So you just basically pass them on.
Right. Okay.
Presumably that's why it's important the therapist doesn't have any similar stuff.
Yeah, because he'll.
Otherwise you're going to absorb the entity.
Yeah, I've had a few of them. Yeah, I have had sessions with one or two clients where I've kind of cleared an entity and I thought, hang on, getting home later, something doesn't feel quite right.
Yeah.
And is this entity? And it's still, it left her and it's jumped onto me.
Mm.
So I have to do a little bit of clearing work there. But the key to really doing that is to clean the entity. So the entity opens and it's cleaned,
Mm.
rather than actually just goes off intact.
Yeah.
Because you're just passing on the problem.
Yeah.
And at the moment, the astral realm associated, or very closely associated with the earth, is just full of these entities. It's so congested, you could say, from people dying over the course of the last 2.4 million years or something like that. So, yeah. So all those astral fragments, many of them are dissolving, many of them have dissolved, but many of them are still wandering the earth. 95%, roughly speaking, I haven't done a survey of this, but roughly speaking, 95% of all entities are samskars. The samskars only. 5% maybe, roughly speaking, are other beings, actual beings, not astral fragments. Yeah,
So
tiny amount.
you would have to be a saintly person. You wouldn't have any samskars.
Yeah, well they are.
Talking about Mother Teresa, for example, just an example.
Sure. Yeah, you would.
She wouldn't have any.
I would
Light
suppose
ones?
very little.
Light ones.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know about Mother
I'm not
Teresa.
sure about
Well,
that.
that was just an example.
Yeah, Catholicism might be a very heavy one.
Mother Teresa in particular.
Yeah.
Challenge that.
Yeah, I don't know. But certainly enlightened yogis, a large part of their astral bodies would have been cleared. The Buddha did this. We hear the story of the Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree. And if you know that story, was it 12 days he sat there or something like that? I can't remember quite now. Do you know, Chrissy?
Wasn't it more like 40 days?
40 days, yes, that's right, 40 days, there you go. Yeah. So he sat there and he didn't move, and he was attacked by demons. When you read the accounts, he was attacked by demons. These really were his samskars. What they were doing, they were starving, hungry. They were wanting to prey on his consciousness, but he wasn't giving them the food, he wasn't reacting. He wasn't reacting to the impulse to go and do a particular behaviour or to enjoy a particular type or form of gratification, to nurture the samskar. Because that's what it wants. It wants that nurturance energy from that behaviour, from that sensual world. So it impulses us all the time to do certain things, in order that once we do that thing, it becomes activated by it. It's dormant, but it still has a dynamic. It still has a dynamic because it has to be fed. It has to draw us to the trigger. It's like drawing us all the time to the blow. that eventually then will trigger it because it's a corresponding energy, and then they can open and then they can be fed. Can you see? But our samskaras are always vying for our attention in our astral field, impulsing us into certain behaviours. Constantly. And the dominant ones are the ones we feel the strongest, and the ones we usually, I would say, probably go with. And after they've been fed, as I say, the samskara then becomes into its passive state, and then that impulse is no more. And you think, oh God, why did I say that? Or why did I behave in that way? It's like it doesn't make sense when it goes quiet. Until next time. So it's got, oh, I'm off again, you know? That's samskaras. They have an activating phase and a declining phase, and that mirrors into our behaviour. Okay, so what happens then? Because I want to go down before I go up. And we've done an hour already, and I've got another 2 hours to do, so we're going to get a move on, okay? Because we haven't got off the earth plane yet. We're still here. We're still on our deathbed. Now, what quite often happens is if we have quite an attachment, or even if we don't have an attachment, but our psychic faculties are very open, is we'll experience something the Tibetans particularly call the bardo. Who's heard of the bardo? Chrissy has, yeah. If I tell you have. Who hasn't heard of the bardo? Okay, the bardo. The bardo basically is the scene with our inner eyes shortly after the moment of death of our samskaras. We're suddenly confronted with all these demons with pitchforks, these hideous faces, you know, angels, divine beings, as well as, you know, we'll see, because we have positive imprints as well as negative imprints during the course of a lifetime. See, the positive imprints are about the pursuit of happiness here, which isn't real. But we can feel like, you know, that we can be happy here. And that's a positive imprint. But it's not from source. It's an illusion that there's a false happiness in a way. But they can be positively imprinted into us as well. So we have positive and negative imprints. In the temple we used to call these positive imprints name, fame, honour, distinction. Name, fame, honour, distinction. They're not traumas, it's not pain, but they can be very deeply imprinted into us. You know, if you know we're very proud, for example, very arrogant. You know, these are also samskaras. So these positive and negative imprints will all be presented to the inner eye shortly after the moment of death, and will enter into what's called the world of the bardo. They have a book in Tibet called the Tibetan Book of the Dead, yeah, which is supposed to be read to the deceased person for 3 days on their deathbed, because it's understood that for 3 days they're probably travelling through this bardo existence. You've heard of this, yeah? And really, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and I read this when I was in my 20s, I think. It's really quite amazing because it's actually an instruction manual for the recently departed. In terms of, if you see this, do this. If you see this, then it's about this. If this happens to you, don't worry. You know, sort of thing. You know, kind of thing, you know. It's very flowery, you know, and there are lots of descriptions of different types of entities and beings that you would encounter in the bardo. But all of that, from my understanding, or at least the vast majority of that, is simply our own creation that we're seeing suddenly released as the astral body fragments reflected back to us in the astral space or the astral void. This is our bardo. And the key to this is to stay still and not try and run away from anything or towards anything. Which really is, you might say, the key instruction in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, is to really go back to soul or spirit and not laterally out into the astral world. Because if you do that, and many people do at the moment of death, you actually become a walker at this level of existence. You actually become associated with the earth plane and what's called an earthbound spirit. Can you see how that would happen? Because you're either running away from Dim or running to, but you've caught yourself up in your own projection.
Panic.
Yeah, panic, fear, whatever. You know? And none of us have seen this stuff during the course of an earthly sojourn. Unless you develop that inner seeing, clairvoyance, you don't see this. So it's suddenly a shock that all these hideous forms and sounds are suddenly apparent to you at the moment of death. And it can be quite a traumatic experience for some of us.
So what to do?
Well, what to do is to always go back into one's centre, to always go back into one's soul consciousness, in terms of, these are just samskars. This is just my own creation, and this is being projected back to me, because of the fragmentation of the astral body. And actually it's nothing to do with me, and just to be in that still centre. Again, it's meditation, and it's the practice of these disciplines during the course of a human life that prepares you for that. If you're not prepared for that, you'll just go flying off with it all, and then you're kind of stuck here, unfortunately, because all of that you're seeing are the creations of your earthly life. And you've just become involved with it, and trapped by it, and caught and snared by it. And here you will dwell. And this is the lowest level of the astral. Should we move some of these out of here? These are dirty.
Sorry to do.
That's all right. Let's take this one over here. Actually, can you just unpin that other one from there? I'm going to move this along. Actually, there's got a bit of space. That'll leave you free to sit down. I need to have a projector with all of these, really. One stuck on the other there.
So what happens when somebody commits suicide?
Yeah, we'll get to that. Let's have that. Yeah, sorry about that. Sorting out my displays.
This is really cool. It's like in medicine work, the experience. This is what I experienced in medicine work.
Yeah.
That's what you described.
Yeah.
And the key with that, what we would remember is to hold the light, just to keep holding to the light.
To keep holding the light, to stay
Because
centred.
it's just to keep remembering it, no
Yep.
matter what's threatening you, and it would be tentacles, demons, and all sorts of things.
There are,
To try
you-
and
Yeah,
distract you, or to get your attention, or to get you in their story.
exactly. To get you in their story.
Yeah, and it was to keep remembering the light, and then it would go through to something else.
Totally, it would just transform, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what happens to the Bardo experience. It transforms. So if any of us find ourselves in that environment after death, you'll have to remember this talk and go, actually, I recognise this, I know where I am, I'm in the Bardo right now, right? Which is just the lower astral realm. So the reason why I'm coming here, really, is what I've got here on this chart is just the astral and the mental realms. So just ignoring this for now. The astral realm is divided into 2 and further divided into 7, like we were describing about 45 minutes ago. So really we're at the level of the 3rd dimension, so we're here at the Earth's surface. So this is the 3rd level of the astral. It's basically, that level of the astral plane is synonymous or level with this plane of existence. And on that level there are many, many wandering souls. Astral fragments, samskars, yes. Entities, yes. Human beings also walking the earth. Walking the earth. The interesting thing that happens with a samskar also, when it is released from a dying person's astral body, when that fragments and the samskar goes off into the astral plane, is it no longer has to compete with the mob. It's much more vicious on its own. And it's much more acutely felt. It doesn't have competition. You see? So there's those guys and there's human beings. What can happen, as I said to you a little while ago, probably about half an hour ago, is that quite often a human being at the moment of death will obviously know what's happening, and they will grasp onto life, they will grasp onto the familiar out of fear. There will be that instinctive holding on to what they know and to their egoic consciousness. I've had this when I've done things like astral projection or something else called lucid dreaming. It can be very hard to go off onto these states because you'll feel when your astral body is disconnecting, you suddenly panic and you want to get back. It's like a sudden kind of almost knee-jerk reaction that then pulls you instantly back into your physical body again. And you go, oh, didn't do it that time. But with practice you can overcome that. But for those that are not familiar with, and this is the vast majority of human beings, any kind of spiritual work, perceptions, understandings or practices, they will just go with a knee-jerk reaction, unfortunately, and they will just hold on to their egoic consciousness. Now, if that consciousness is very dense and very heavy, and they have very coarse samskars, effectively that will give them a very heavy astral field. Correspondingly, their astral body will be very dense and heavy. That will cause them to literally gravitate down to a lower astral plane. And there are lower astral planes below the earth, as well as going up. What tends to happen with our astrality, at least, is that we tend to gravitate to the same plane that our astral body is vibrating at. So like attracts like. This is what I call a specific gravity. So we have a specific gravity, a certain density, a certain heaviness and lightness, with the combined effect, you might say, of all our samskars working together, that would create a certain vibration, you might say, in our astral body per se. At the moment of death, that vibration will find the corresponding plane in the astral, and we will just automatically, as it were, float there and hover there and go there. So if you have a very dense astral body with very heavy samskars, that will weigh you down. It'll take you into the lower astral. This plane of existence is actually just beneath the surface of the earth. It's actually inside the earth. There's a theory actually been going around, I think since the 1920s or 30s, called hollow earth theory. Who's heard of this? Yeah. So the idea is that the earth is actually hollow, there's another system inside the earth and all of this. Now I don't know whether that's true or not, but I certainly know that there are dimensions and realms that actually go beneath the surface of the earth. There is the lower astral. And these are basically realms of darkness. They are realms where there's very little consciousness, very little, remember, of the masculine, principle of light and consciousness, but very, very dense, heavy energy and matter.
Inferno.
Yeah, well, there's an inferno there because of one thing, which I'll get to in a moment. But there's no heat. In fact, these realms could be seen as places of absolute desperation, darkness, loneliness, and torment. And they exist. It's a jolly talk, this, isn't it? It's nice.
Is that what 3, 2, and 1 on?
3, 2, 1?
3, 2, and 1 on your chart?
No, 2. Just below the Earth. 3 is the Earth's surface on my chart.
I know, but the other 3.
What, down here? 1, 2.
No, on the left. That 3. You've got
Oh, sorry. 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, these are these realms here. So as we're coming up.
Okay.
So this is the 3rd dimension, 4th dimension, 5th dimension, 6th dimension.
Okay.
So don't worry about that.
Thank you.
We're more here, really. Yeah. So we're really at the 3rd level here, which is the Earth's surface and below. So these are people that really are, you might say, addicted to sensory gratification. These are individuals that are compulsed into certain behaviours during their earthly life. And that draws them down into the lower planes of consciousness. These are individuals really that haven't cultivated any kind of higher aspiration or higher consciousness during their earthly life, and they've just gone for the gross, physical, sensual existence, at the detriment usually of other human beings, but at the gratification of their own selfish, egoic consciousness. So these are really quite selfish people that would actually descend rather than rise up after death. I'm going to get into descent first, because we'll just deal with that first. And then we can go up towards heaven and end hopefully on a good note. Okay, but you have to know that these realms exist.
So,
Yeah, and we can go down as well as up. Depends how we've lived this life. Yes, Libertad? Depends how we've lived this life.
That's where you're going, yeah?
Yeah, because your consciousness will probably, if you have no higher perspective and no higher aspiration, and you haven't done any work on yourself or very little, will hold on at the moment of death to these heavier imprints, which will just literally pull you down. It's like your balloon, as it were. If you imagine a balloon has just got too much weight, too much ballast, and that balloon will sink. These realms really you might call places which are filled with other similar beings that actually just want to get what they want to get from everybody else for themselves at the expense of everybody else, you could say. We see a lot of that here going on, even though obviously this is the physical world. That level of astrality is very much dominant in our culture and our society in this world today. Dog eat dog, get what you get. It's egoic consciousness, just gratify the self as much as you can. I'm amazed sometimes when I speak to people that this is the way they think. I was around at a relative's house just yesterday, and they were telling me this is what life's about. It's like it's just, I don't know what to say. It's almost like my jaw drops to the floor. I'm thinking, how do I counteract this? You know, in 5 minutes. But it's like, well, you're dead, and you just enjoy your life and just get what you can out of everybody and everything as you're going through your life. And I'm saying, but where's the enjoyment in that? It's the endless promise and the endless pursuit of happiness and pleasure, but very little in the way of enjoyment here. But when you sink down to the next level, there is no gratification of that. You have the impulse for that, right? Which is very powerful and very dominant and very strong, but you have no way of satisfying it. No way of satisfying it. So what happens is that desire builds and builds and builds and builds within your astral vehicle, and you're constantly trying to exploit people in the environment around you to get that desire fulfilled, but it is never fulfilled, not one iota. And that's why it's called hell. And that is what burns. That is the fire that burns us from the inside. Now what happens in astral hell is that eventually we get exhausted with that process. Surprise, surprise, we start to realize actually this isn't working. You know, after maybe, I don't know how long, maybe decades or even sometimes hundreds of years, some souls are hanging out in this place, realizing actually they're not getting their desires met and they're just burning more and more and more on the inside with this unrequited feeling and this impulse to satisfy which is never fulfilled. Eventually that burns out. So hell is temporary. It's temporary. And at any time we can make the choice to go up. Any time we can be free of that. It's a question of choice. Or we get to the point where we're just totally exhausted with this frustrating process and we can't and we just literally burn ourselves out. And then we rise up. Because at that moment what happens, those astral samskaras are released. Those heavy samskaras are released, which makes your specific gravity a little lighter. So you float up. Can you see? And as you're below the earth plane, you'll effectively float up to this level of existence again. To this plane. Can you see that? So we've released the ballast. Effectively it lightens our load. It lightens the overall vibration in our astral, which then corresponds to a higher level or a higher plane within the astral world. So we then go there. And the way we move between these planes is instant. There's no like, oh, I'm going to take a little walk, you know, or have to get in my car, or, you know, I get transported there. These planes, as I said at the beginning, are everywhere all the time simultaneously. So what happens is like one level of existence fades out, and simultaneously another level, another plane fades in. And suddenly we find ourselves in this place, and we don't know how we got there. And that's a common experience. It's a common experience. There is one other level, which is right down here, which is what I've called the subterranean level here, which worst of humanity I've put there. Yeah. So these are those human beings really that live their life here on earth that you might say are the most cruel. They are the most vicious, they are the most cruel in terms of their expression here on earth. And they actually cause suffering and pain to other human beings. Most intense suffering and pain. So these usually then sink even below the level I've just described, in terms of the low astral, to an even lower level of the astral, which is very, very dark, a very, very painful place of isolation and suffering, where really we are very much alone and isolated from our fellow human beings and from life and everything. And even there, we can redeem ourselves. Because eventually we get fed up with that, eventually we get bored with that, eventually we've had enough of that, and then those astral elements are released, and we rise up. So this is astral hell. Great, huh?
Cold, dark, confinement for torturers or something like that.
It's like what?
Cold, dark, hell for
Yeah.
torturers or something.
Yeah, in a way. It is in a way like
But
the
they
law.
don't experience that.
It's the law of karma, yeah.
Torturing others, they don't
Yeah.
experience that.
They will. Yeah, it's in fact, you can't clear karma in the astral. you create karma here on earth, and you have to clear it here on earth. So anything we create here karmically has to be cleaned in this life or future lives. All we're doing in the astral is we're actually refining our astral body. We're releasing the heavier elements so we can rise back up towards the causal body. We want to go back home. But we have to release all this baggage that we've accumulated during the course of our life. Our ego identification, our wounds, our hurts, our pains, our scars, our samskars have to be released in order that we can rise up. Okay, so I'm going to move on briefly. There's more to say about that, but we'll do that another day. We're going. You have to go move your car? Okay.
Purgatory.
Yeah.
Purgatory.
Sorry?
You covered purgatory.
We're going to come to purgatory now.
Not hidden. Just so.
Yeah. Okay. See you in a little while. So we're going to come up to the earth plane. So we've come out of astral hell, which is the difficult part of this talk, maybe into the earth level of existence.
Can I just, clarify for myself
Yep.
quickly, an experience of the void as this utter emptiness, but
Yes.
when you still have a sense of your ego disappearing and you're just the seer left, and
Yes.
the fear that comes with that,
Yes.
total sense of isolation.
Yes.
Is that down here, or
Yes.
are you moving towards an ultimate truth that is up there? Or
No,
is
it's
it
more down.
disguising itself
More down.
there?
It's astral
Has
experience.
some ultimate truth that isn't really.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like the void. That's where you just cut off from the whole of life and you're in this
Yeah.
isolation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. The void, which is up here at this level, the seventh dimension, and above, is only a void when you're looking at it from below. Yeah. Most of what we're describing here is the manifested reality, or the created reality, and yet beyond this there was another level of existence. In the Indian Vedas, they mostly deal with what's beyond this. They say not to preoccupy yourself too much with all of this. And they call that Leela. And for me, most of my life and most of what I've studied in the Vedas is to do with that. It's to do with the spiritual dimensions and the spiritual reality and what's happening, from this level on up. These are the pastimes and the stories in the scriptures, and they're wonderful. Yeah, but that's beyond that, Leela. This is the opposite of Leela, is this realm here, which is called karma, because this is the realm of cause and effect. So we will get the effect of all our causes in the astral world. You get away with it here maybe, but only for the course of a brief lifetime. Then you have to face it. You don't clear that karma because you have to work through that karma in physical incarnation in your next life or subsequent lives. But you have to release it in order that you can rise back up and become again who or what you actually are. You enter back into the causal or higher nature again. You become the higher self. But to be your higher self, you have to release all these heavier elements within you. And hell is a part of that. It's temporary, it's non-permanent, it's totally subject to our choice. We can leave it at any time we choose. And yet for most individuals that are down here, they're not choosing to do that because they're trying to satisfy themselves. Eventually that burns out, they release those heavier astral elements and they rise up. So in a way it's a purification. It's a purification. We come here eventually to the Earth's surface, of course. If we go down, we eventually have to come up. So we're back here on the third level of the astral, where we have a lot of these other souls that are wandering around. Remember that we're attached to earthly existence. And at this level, really, a person's astral mechanism is ambivalent, you might say. It's attracted to good and bad. It's a bit like our human existence here. There's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. It's polarized, as I've said here. Whereas when we go down, we're overtly associating with samskars and the heavier elements in our consciousness. Here there's a mix, almost like a balance. Polarized consciousness, some good, some bad. Pretty much the average human being. Yeah. So a lot of people find themselves here at this level. This is known as purgatory. The reason why it's known as purgatory is that the astral realm that is associated very closely with the surface of this earth is a realm where these souls can walk and they can actually perceive the earthly existence. But they can't enter into the game of life. So again, they want to have physicality, they want to have sensuous pleasure, they want to have the enjoyments of this physical world that they can perceive, but they can't get any of it again. So in the Bible, I think at least they call this purgatory. And it's really a realm of cleansing our desires, again, through not being able to express them. And quite often at this level, they will associate with a human being. So you'll find that this is in that 5% category, where these astral humans that haven't quite released their affiliation for the earth will actually sit in someone's aura. They will, or they'll come and go and make their presence felt in that way, as they try to get gratification through impulsing that individual to do certain actions and behaviours. They get some sort of pleasure from that. And that's often the case with entities that actually then you might call a possession type entities. Some of them can be very forceful. I felt a few of these. The worst ones I've ever felt were the ones I experienced in India in holy places, because you have the combination of intense material desire coupled with yogic power. Yeah, I mean these almost, you might say, they want to force you out of this residence. It felt like to me they want to push me out, and they were pushing me out, so that they can fully occupy this and take this over. And that would be a case of complete possession. And that does happen, but very, very rarely, because it requires an incredible amount of force to actually move the inhabiting Atma out of the body.
I mean, would you die then?
No, you wouldn't die, but you would actually, as it were, start to wake up in the lower astral world, and you'd be aware of yourself doing things, but like it's kind of like a remote view.
So you'd be insane.
You'd be going slightly mad. Yeah, you go insane. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people that are insane have this phenomena. It was one of the reasons behind this. The other one is primary and secondary psychoses, which I do want to get into, and I meant to talk about that. You asked about that last time.
And schizophrenia.
Schizophrenia, yeah, and such like, which isn't this. Which isn't this. That's the premature fragmenting of the astral body. It's the premature fragmenting, while we're still in it. It's like we go through the death process to one degree or another. Aspects or fragments of us are broken off from our astral body, so certain aspects of the ego are lost to us. And there's a distortion and a distortion in what's called the chitta, which mixes up our thoughts and ideas and beliefs about reality.
But it can come back in again, can't it?
Yeah, we can fix ourselves, but it's hard work to repair that once the damage is done. Yeah, and there are certain experiences that can do that. Shock, trauma. Psychotropics can do that, actually. They can actually start to fragment our astral. Not that I'm not recommending it, psychotropics that is, but you have to be very careful with that.
Psychotropics.
Yeah, hallucinogenic drugs.
Oh, okay. Psychoactives.
Yeah. And in fact, all sorts of different drugs can do that without having hallucinogenic effects. They can cause fragmentation in the astral. Yeah, artificially so.
Mm.
Yeah. Anyway, that's psychosis. I'll come back to that at the end if we have time.
Mm.
This is another phenomenon called possession. Yeah.
And then some scaric entities. What's the ultimate loving kind of solution to them? Because you say that you empty them out, but there's still some kind of vessel. What ultimately is?
No, that would be completely clean.
They
There's no
dissolve
vessel.
and then
Yeah,
they go.
totally.
Right.
Yeah, love is the key to that.
Yeah.
Samskara really. I have a drawing of this. I think I left it away for next time. We're going to have to cover this a little bit more detail when I've got more time. If there's a core group of us that want to come back, maybe in the spring or the summer, we can go into these things in more detail then. But the samskara really has a subconscious. It has a subconscious mind. It's just very primitive, very simple. And then it has a shell, which is its consciousness. What we experience from the samskaras is consciousness, not this subconscious. We'll get into this another time. But the consciousness really is protecting that subconscious wound. That's the reaction. Go away, go away. Well, yeah. That's the shell. But what we do with samskars ideally is we open the samskar to its own subconscious mechanism. And then it's completely releasing it. But to do that you have to use love. You have to use the energy of love, and the higher energies from the higher planes of consciousness can do that. If we try and do it mechanically, it's almost impossible. You have to do it with force. You can do it with force, but it's very hard work. Better do it with grace and ease and love. And then that samskar is completely clean. Yeah. Okay, so moving on. We're back at the level of the surface of the earth. So we haven't actually moved off the earth yet. So you can see why these are 3-4 hour talks. So moving swiftly forward. What happens to most of us is that we get very little in terms of impressions from the bardo. Very little. The reason is when our kundalini arises and we have that psychic awakening is that we tend to open at the same time in our feeling vessel. So if we don't have a particular affinity and a particular grasping to heavy egoic structures, samskars, then we tend to feel love and we tend to feel more blissful and we tend to experience that as a world of light almost immediately. That makes the transition very easy and very smooth to this next level of the astral plane, the fourth subplane. And what most of us will experience at that point is, it's often been described as a tunnel. I'm sure we've all heard of the tunnel of light. Yeah? So obviously those that go down and those that stay on the earth don't experience the tunnel. Okay? So this is for those that actually are awakening on their deathbed and are experiencing the light as love, ecstasy, as an awakening and expansion of their consciousness. And they're drawn, you might say, to the light. You hear this in so many books, how, oh, I see a light, or I noticed a light appears, and I don't know why, but I'm moving towards it. Oh, I don't know why, but I'm just attracted to go towards it. The tunnel really is the astral world that surrounds the earth plane. That's the dark realm, and the tunnel is the passage through that. Yeah, can you see from what we've already uncovered? Yeah. So what happens then, and this is for most of us probably sitting here today, and for most people that undergo hypnotic regression or clinical death, and certainly what the scriptures describe is this experience of going towards the realm of light. So we're leaving the earth plane, moving towards the realm of light, which is moving with masculine consciousness. Because remember, the realms of light are part of the masculine dynamic of consciousness. Consciousness and light are one and the same. So we're moving to a higher level of consciousness, a realm of light. What happens there usually is one of several things. Let's go back. Yeah. We normally go straight through into the fourth subplane of the astral world. And we're normally at that point aware of our deceased ancestors. At least the ones that haven't taken another birth. So these are the ones that are perhaps recently deceased in the last, say, 100 years. Because we're there for at least 100 years or more. At least. So those ones that are actually in the afterlife but have not taken birth, that are close to us, will actually come and greet us at that threshold into the realms of light. And we've often seen or heard experiences of this. Like I saw my granddad, or I saw my grandmother, I saw my mother, or I saw my daughter that died, you know, whatever. And there's this wonderful experience of greeting one's loved ones. And my understanding of this is it's in many concentric circles around that.
Are you talking about near-death experiences?
People that go through near-death experience this in just the same way. Yeah. Although it's short-lived because they've got to come back into physicality. Yeah. There's also another phenomenon, it's like that, you know, the clinical death phenomena, I assume. Yeah. Who's familiar with clinical death phenomena? Who knows what that is? Oh, sorry, okay, I just assumed everybody did. Okay, clinical death is when you die, in a hospital usually, and you come back to life. Usually after some minutes. Now, most people I think that experience this don't experience anything, it's just like they black out. But there are some cases where people experience this journey. So they go through the tunnel, they go to the realms of light, they meet deceased ancestors, they gain wisdom and information, and then they're told at some juncture that they have to come back into physicality, that their job is not over, and they're forced to return almost. Or they have to be brought to their senses where they see the sense of coming back, and they make a choice to come back. This is called clinical death. And for some reason, somebody can be completely flatlined, even in terms of their brain activity, totally dead, and yet they'll suddenly spring to life. They'll wake up.
I've seen it in the films.
You've seen it in the films, yeah. You know all about it then. Hollywood's such a great thing. Yeah.
Do they see their sand skulls?
No, because their astral body has not fragmented.
Okay.
Yeah, they have to come back into physicality. It's like they're given some sort of glimpse or reprieve, but they have to come back.
So they visit these realms in the astral body?
It'll be the lowest astral realm. Yeah.
Whereabouts are we now?
We're on the fourth. We're just off the earth plane.
Okay.
We've just moved here. Yes.
So that's where they would go with their
Yes.
astral body intact.
Well, a lot of samskars would have been released at the moment of death because the astral body would have fragmented, so it's not intact.
No, I mean the people who have clinical death.
Oh, yes, the people have clinical death, their astral bodies are intact, yes. Yes, that integrity is maintained through that experience. It's not something that fragments, not at that time. It would require the Kundalini force to rise within the body in order that would happen, and that hasn't happened. They've just gone off, you could say. They can't stay, they can't live in the realms of light because their astral body would be too dense to be there, but they could have a brief visit, which is what they have, for just a few minutes, and then they have to come back. Yeah. So, if they actually died and their astral body fragmented, there'd be no way back. Yeah, and it's at that point that something called the silver cord is also broken. With the rise of Kundalini, that cord is snapped. Have you heard of the silver cord?
Yeah.
The silver thread? Does everybody know about that? Okay. No? Okay. Well, when we die, it's a little bit like when we go to bed at night and when we dream. See, when we sleep, our physical etheric mechanism is intact in our bed. And the etheric body, which is our life energy body, our chi body, is able to nourish and repair our physical body without the interference of the astral. The astral body and consciousness then goes off to explore other realms and dimensions. What we would then interpret as dreams when we wake up. But there has to be a way for the astral body and consciousness to reconnect with the physical etheric. You have to find your way back, basically. And one of the ways to do that is through an energetic link. And in fact, the only way really that we do it is through this energetic link. It's called the silver cord. So at the one end it's made up of etheric atoms and molecules, and at the other end it's made up of astral atoms and molecules. And these two mix to create this cord. And that always means that when you travel during sleep, you always come back to your physical body and awaken in that physical body. It would be pretty strange if you woke up in somebody else's body. Because of that connection, that energetic connection.
That may be good.
Make a great film, yeah. Yeah. But at the moment of death, obviously, with the rising of the Kundalini Shakti, that silver cord is broken. Yeah, so it means then we're completely free then of that etheric physical vessel, which then decomposes. Yeah.
So what would happen in resuscitation?
But if you're resuscitated, that silver cord is
And
yeah, still
brought you
intact.
back to life, the surgeons or whatever.
Still intact.
Still intact.
Yeah, Kundalini has not been activated. Kundalini has not awoken. It hasn't broken that connection. It's still intact.
So if you have a Kundalini awakening when you're just fully alive,
Well, you're supposed to have a Kundalini awakening when you're alive.
so, but you're saying the Kundalini rises when you die, but if
Yeah.
you have that happen, a Kundalini awakening when you're alive, what
Yeah.
happens to the silver cord?
It stays intact.
Oh.
Yeah, it stays intact. It does not break the silver cord at that moment. Yeah. What you're doing, basically, doing the process of enlightenment, and I don't know if anybody's figured it out yet, but in the enlightenment process is like a slow death. Can you see that?
Yeah.
It's like a very slow 70 to 100 year death. And actual old age is a blessing. It's a preparation for disassociating with egoic consciousness and releasing samskars as we get older. So the fact that we have bodies that are frail and old and all of this actually loosens our attachments to this physical body, this egoic construct. So at the moment of death we can move on.
But the whole life is in preparation to
It
death.
is, yeah. But the whole life really is one long death.
But what about people that raise the Kundalini and then they remain alive afterwards? They haven't. What happens then when they die? Let's say it's many, many years after they've raised the Kundalini.
Well, they've done it once and then carried on in the normal life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they've done it without
Yeah.
dying.
Okay, yeah, let's look
So
at that.
there's
I've
an
got to move on through these
awakened
different
state.
levels here. But okay, so there's a distinction here between awakening and experiences and enlightenment. So we can all have awakening and experiences. That doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be more enlightened. Because we can just reset our egoic consciousness when we come out of that experience. Most of us do. Yeah? So we can have many, many awakening experiences, but it doesn't equate to enlightenment whatsoever. you know, like you could take some drug. They could give you a vision of the inner realms and the inner realities. When the drug wears off and you come back to earthly existence, your conditioned mind takes over again. And actually, it could actually compact you even more further down if what you experienced in terms of what you saw when you were on the drugs was horrific or scary or frightening in some way. You think, oh, I don't want to go there again. You know. Sort of knee-jerk reaction. But that's an awakening experience, and we all have awakening experience, but that doesn't mean you're going to be enlightened. Can you see? And really that's just like scenery. It's just like scenery. And we are obsessed in the Western mindset with spiritual scenery. We all want the experiences. But in the Vedas it teaches us that is a byproduct. It's a symptom of enlightenment. And not to be caught up with the scenery. Otherwise we won't become enlightened. It's a little bit if you drive, like if you're driving a car and you're going to a particular destination and you're just completely preoccupied with what's going on laterally. Oh, look at that lovely tree. Oh, look at that lovely valley. Oh, look at that beautiful house. You're not focused on where you're going. And you get caught up with it. Oh, let's just park here for a little while. Let's have a picnic. Let's enjoy this. You know, can you see? And that's what happens in terms of our spiritual progression. We have an awakening experience and we literally park there. It's like, let's have a picnic here, you know, for the next 2 or 3 decades. You know, this is my thing. You know, this is the journey that I'm on right now. Oh yeah. You've just gone sideways into the astral world. And you've just forgotten about the real purpose, because you've got into the enjoyment and the pleasure of astral gratification and the experience of the inner reality, rather than maintaining your focus towards enlightenment.
But isn't that a phase you have to go through? Like,
You have to learn, yeah.
Just like people on Earth do. They get
That's exactly right, Jill.
gratified. So isn't that just part of that progression?
It totally is, and we have to learn that actually these realms, actually they're incredibly, I mean I've experienced them many times and they're incredibly seductive. You go, wow, this is amazing, I could just live here. You know, it's wonderful. You know. And yet if you stay there, you are staying there. You're not moving up. You're just hovering at that level. And you learn and you get disillusioned with that, as I did, and you think, well, that's not the real thing, I have to carry on. Which is a great lesson to learn. But awakening experiences do not equate to enlightenment. And we're not talking about awakening experiences here. When we're doing this work, we're talking about actual disciplined, structured work that takes you towards enlightenment. Experiences will come as a byproduct, and you will experience things, but it's not what we go for and it's not what we hook into. We'd be lost by it. We get lost in that. Most people are. Most people have gone laterally into one or more of these places, and they think it's spiritual. As my teacher Solohin said, you know, it appears to be spiritual, but actually is not spiritual. They've gone lateral. They've come off their vertical axis, off into some dimension, some realm, some experience. Okay?
Yeah.
That was a long answer, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's only like having a holiday, isn't it? It all might be nice to go over to India or go to Australia for that experience to see what it's like. So going laterally into different, dimensions and that. It's
It can help.
different,
It
isn't
can help to a point, I agree. Because for a very closed mind or for a very tight ego, it can open us up. But it can only take us so far. Because it's not the experience of home, which is the experience we're ultimately after. And it can prove to be a real distraction to that. Yeah. How am I doing, Sylvia?
9:15.
Okay, 15 minutes to do everything else. Okay. Alright, so we just got a little bit off the earth. Okay. So this is a place where we meet our guides, where we meet deceased relatives, because they already are in the astral, so long as they haven't reincarnated, that is. Okay, so we get to meet these guys. There's a connection, which is a love connection, and there's an opening at that level. This is a realm which looks pretty much like the earth realm. And we tend to do, at this level of existence, of the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth, refinements on our earthly existence. So at this level, we want a nice big car, we want a nice big house. There's lots of houses, lots of people living, doing their thing, living, you might say, their idyllic life, as they would have ideally have liked to have lived here on earth, without the pressure of money, finance, security, and even a physical body that can weigh you down and get a bit ill and a bit weak and a bit poorly from time to time. So all that is just taken away, and you're able to enjoy really what you could call, or what we call in this work, astral heaven. It's not actually heaven, which is the next step, which we'll get to in a moment. I mean, it's obviously not hell either, but it's a transition. It's a process of actually becoming disillusioned at every subplane here, of which there are 4 above the earth, where we're just releasing our attachments, releasing our conditioning, releasing our samskaras, heavier ones at first, lighter and finer as we move up through these subplanes. Can you see that? So right down here, it's pretty much like life on earth, but without any of the pain and suffering. Up here, we're releasing much more of the finer impulses and desires within us. We're cleaning out the very fine samskaras, you might say, at that level. So our astral body then is very, very, very light. Yeah? And these are just our attachments to our earthly life, our conditioning to our earthly existence. We have to clean all of that. And this is how we do it, moving up through the dimensions. And as we look at things, or we become disillusioned with something, and we don't want it, or we don't desire it anymore, we unload. Those atoms, those samskars are released, and our load becomes lighter. We move up, that dimension disappears, another dimension appears, and we moved up to the next level spontaneously. It's not something we have to know about, it's something that happens through the law of correspondence, and we just move up, move up, move up. Refining, refining, refining our impulses and desires at each step of the astral, particularly the 4 levels above the earth. And then there's an interesting thing that happens at this juncture, because we've completely cleared our astral body. At that point, we go a second death. So we had the first death with the physical body, and now we have a second death. And it's the death of the astral body. So that body has to now be put to rest and die. So we release that, and on the release of that, then, and only then, do we move into what you could call heaven.
And how long does it take before you can get out of the astral body?
Well, that depends on the individual. It's totally relative in terms of how fast or how capable they are processing through their desires and impulses. See, most of us, we end up here and we just want to enjoy what's going on there in terms of those astral experiences. So we tend to hang around there for a long time, and it can take a long time for that world of pleasure and gratification and sensuality, which is greatly enhanced compared to the earthly experience. It can take a long time for us to become weary of that.
And when you say a long time,
Well, it can take hundreds of years. But some of us can
you've done
move.
some of that work ahead of time before you left the
That's it.
physical plane.
Yeah, you should be doing that while you're in your physical body. So those samskaras are cleaned while you're in physical incarnation. You'll pass through the astral realms very quickly then. Or you'll just go straight to the next level. You won't even notice that this exists. These are realms really of rest and play. This is like where we're resting, where we're processing, where we're refining, where we're releasing. And it's all to do with these impulses, our desires. Yeah? You okay with that? Then there's the second death, where the astral body then is left behind. And then we move into heaven. The ancients call this Devachan, astral heaven. Heaven, which is associated really with this area here called Manas. So you might have noticed, if we go back to the beginning of the talk, that the astral world is split into 2. And below we have the dark realms, you might say, of purgatory and hell. And above we have the lighter, more refined realms of astral heaven. And as I said, astral heaven is not really heaven. Once we've cleared the astral body and we've been released from the astral body, the astral dies, we are then in Devachan, which is heaven. At that point, we experience bliss like we've never experienced. At that point, we're almost home. It's the final leg of the journey. But even here we have 2 divisions. That realm is split into 2. So we have the lower mind and we have the higher mind. Yeah? Just like we have lower desires and higher desires. So here we're looking at basically our vrittis. Remember the subtle elements that exist in and around the brain. We have to clear them. So this is our ideas, these are our beliefs, these are our constructs, this is our intellect, this is our rationale, these are all the understandings. All of that's got to go during our sojourn here through the lower mental plane, also known as Devachan. So because our astral is clean and clear, we're not experiencing emotions anymore, but we're experiencing the feelings of bliss, because we've got a clean astral field. So we can feel who we are. But still we're not home because of the mental elements that then need to be clean. So there's the refinement process in the 4 subplanes of the mental plane where we are refining, 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 refining. All the way up to the philosophical level. Religious models usually at the lower levels of the astral, they have to be completely let go of at that level. Going higher and higher and higher as we go, and eventually there is a 3rd death. So you think it's bad enough having one death, you have to have another one and another one. You know, it's like number 3, where we let go really of our mental body. We die to what we think or we understand to be who we are, to be understand or think reality is, also has to go. And at that point, the 3rd death, we enter back home again into our causal body. This is our true home, our true home. And even here there are 3 levels to causality. Now if you remember at the beginning of the talk, I'm going to go back here. Is it back here?
Here?
Oh, here, no, I had it. It's this one. If you remember at the beginning of the talk, we sort of arrived here, you see, at Devachan. Yeah? And then there's the death of the mental body here, through the refining process of our ideas, beliefs, constructs, and all of that. And eventually then we'll enter back into our causal. At the causal body, we have what we call manas. And manas is the lowest of the 3 aspects of our soul. Remember, we have manas, buddhi, and atma. These 3 make up the soul. Remember? I will go here. We have will, wisdom, love at the level of the monad or the divine spark, which becomes atma, buddhi, manas at the level of the causal body of the soul. This is our causal body. And what has happened at that point is that we basically have harvested our experience here on earth. I call it a harvesting. So all the grosser, heavier elements, which are not us, are released in terms of our emotions and in terms of our thinking. All of that is released. And then what we're left with is basically the positive experiences that we gleaned during that recent incarnation here on earth. All the stuff that really is positive in the sense of expansion of consciousness, seeing who we really are, awakening a resource or a quality we're here on earth. All of that becomes a part of the causal body.
Which of those 3 aspects corresponds to love in this?
The buddhi.
The buddhi.
Yeah. So this is our impulse, this is our feeling of connection, and this is the manas, which is our abstract mind or higher understanding. That's the soul consciousness.
At one point, I can't remember whether it was in talk 1 or 2, but you were talking about it being the causal is a collective. Am I right?
Now the causal in human life, we have one causal body,
Right.
which then attaches to one monad. So one, you could say, spark of spirit, yeah,
Right.
attaches to a causal body, attaches to one personality. So it's one, one, one.
Was there ever any sort of a collective?
Yeah, animals.
Oh,
Yeah, and plants and minerals going back. Greater and greater collectives
okay. Okay.
going back through the different kingdoms.
So we don't all have the same purpose for coming.
Animals do not have a causal body. They're part of a group soul consciousness. But they do have an astral vehicle. They do have astral. Yeah. So they are part of this consciousness mechanism because they're moving towards what's called individualized consciousness. Individualized consciousness is where one monad has one soul, has one physical body. To do that, you have to have this component here, which is called the causal body. That's not created until the, you might say, the astral body of the animal is broken up. Yeah.
So when do we return to our soul group?
Okay, let's get to that in a moment. We've got 5 minutes. Yeah, I want to talk about twin flames and also, what's the other thing people get into a lot? Twin flames and...
Soulmates?
Soulmates, yeah, and soul groups, yeah. So we get into our soul groups when we enter into the 4th subplane of the astral, which is down here.
Right.
But I want to get into twin flames and soulmates if I have time.
When we get to astral heaven before the devil.
Yeah, you'll be reacquainted with your soul group at this level.
And when you were saying I think it was the second death, is that when we let go of all those, the concept of these loved ones and that
Yes.
individualized?
Yes, we do. Yeah. But the soul group really are those monads that were created more or less at the same time together, comprise the soul group. So they will remain in affinity because it's an affinity which is at the monadic level. Yeah. The twin flame, and let's just quickly throw this out and you can just chew on this perhaps after the talk. The twin flame really, remember the absolute? Masculine and feminine counterparts? That's us. One goes on one journey, one comes on the other, and we meet eventually. That's our twin flame. It's the same, but our total opposite. Which is different from the soul group, which is the monads that are created at the same time. Okay?
And at the astral level, do we experience that letting go of loved ones as a painful experience? Is that?
No. Not loved ones as such, because love is what is amplified, love is what is coming forward as we move through the astral plane. Love is the experience we're moving more and more into. So you could say our connection with loved ones is strengthened rather than let go. But there's got to be the pure love that's there. The conditioned love of the earth will be lost, will be let go of. Yeah, because that's samskara based. Yeah. You understand? You can see that, yeah. Yes, Chrissy?
I'm a bit confused because I'm wondering what's happened to the feminine in all of this.
Happened to the what?
The feminine. Because
Well-
you started off by talking all of matter,
Yep.
energy, everything is feminine, but as we go back home,
Yeah.
that's what you describe as the masculine aspect. But you've just said with the twin flames, the feminine.
Yes.
So I'm
Yes.
not sure what's happening with the feminine.
Well, in a way, the feminine reaches up as far as the physical, etheric, and the masculine descends as far as the astral. And when we die, it's as if we disassociate from the energy, physical body. Yeah, that connection is lost, and we move back up towards the realms of consciousness. But my understanding is, at some point, when we are no longer requiring physical incarnation, we will then meet the other flame, the other half.
Okay,
But not until.
right.
That comes after, you could say, causal body death. Yeah.
Right, so that other half it's not, you don't meet it within another person.
If you've resolved up to the level of the buddhi plane in this life, you can.
So two people can come together.
Yeah. If they're completely cleared their astral, mental bodies, and they're at the buddhic level, then there's possible for twin flames to meet on Earth.
But those were originally one and the same.
Yes.
Before, so they were
Yes.
one aspect that split and
Yep.
has come back
Just
together.
like God does in terms of creating the
Yeah.
universal setup that we described,
Right.
we also do
Right. But they'll only come together when both are totally cleared
when we're totally clear.
as samskaras.
That's right, and reincarnation stops.
Right.
The causal body will harvest the experience of the life on earth, will harvest the reflective qualities in terms of our realization about our true nature. Those positive attributes and resources, they become part of our awareness at the causal level. In other words, there's an expansion of our soul consciousness. Our soul becomes more aware of its true nature. That experience is harvested from here. And we keep doing that until we are complete, which could involve maybe hundreds or thousands maybe of incarnations. So the causal body will then send out another mental body, another astral body, another physical body, and come back into physicality. Another incarnation starts. But the agenda for that is set at the level of causality. It's the causal body that designs this life.
So where do you actually start on your chart here? I mean, where's square number 1?
Dunno.
On your
Depends where you want to start pulling this ball of wool, doesn't it, really? You start anywhere.
You can start anywhere.
Yeah. I just happen to start here at physical reality because it's what we're familiar with.
No, I mean on the other chart. On
Oh, here?
Yeah.
Oh, you haven't even got to that, but basically that's a summary of today's talk. We start here in physical birth. We have a life, physical death. And then we can go one of two ways, depending upon how we've lived this life. But let's go up first, obviously. So we're going to go into incarnation because this is not going to be our last life on earth. So then we decide to go up. So we may spend some time in astral hell. We may spend some time walking the earth in purgatory. One, either or both. We'll definitely spend time in astral heaven, refining our astral body. But yet there will be eventually the death of the astral body itself. And then from there we'll enter into true heaven, Devasham, on the mental plane. And then eventually through the refinement of our beliefs and ideas and constructs, because remember, beliefs and ideas and intellectual rationale won't get you to heaven. That has to be released as well. You know, all of that is what turns us away from the light. And sometimes totally obliterates the light, because we're just too much in our heads. We're thinking too much, that we know too much. We're too clever. That has to all go. All go.
Is that what you call the lateral?
Yeah, it's lateral as well, yeah.
The picnic?
Yeah, usually left brain lateral. But it can be right brain lateral, where we're just gullible and we're just believing in anything. Anyway, eventually there's the death of the astral body, and that brings us back into our soul. We are that. Light and consciousness are one again. We are that. So that's our soul nature. It's at this level that we design a new life here on earth, depending upon what qualities we've harvested through all the previous incarnations and what's left in terms of what we need to do as seen by the causal body or the higher nature. It will then pick and create a particular type of mental body, a particular type of astral body as it descends now through the realms and dimensions to choose parents, gender, country, religious background, education and all of that, and eventually preparation of the physical body as an embryo, which will then one day be born, and the whole process of samskara starts all over again in physical life. And that's more or less the circuit that we will do hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times.
And the no and the up.
And there is one thing that happens, there's one thing that happens, which is when we are in physical incarnation and we get as far as the causal consciousness here in physical life. And then we just don't have to reincarnate anymore. When we've reached an enlightened state in physical life, it means our soul consciousness is fully incarnate in our body. There are no samskaras and there are no vrittis in the way. We are clean and clear. Our incarnation then is finished, and eventually when we die, we go back to the causal plane, and that will then be the death of the causal body.
So when you have a second incarnation within the same life,
Sorry?
you know, right, I'm going back to that discussion we had, when you basically have a second cycle within the same incarnation.
Another cycle of expression.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have to have cleared the samskaras from that earlier part
No,
of that life?
no, that
before
choice
you
is
do it?
made at the soul level, not by samskaras. And that's predestined or pre-planned or programmed into this life.
Okay.
So no matter whether you've done a good or a bad job of that, you will go into the second phase.
Right,
Because that's coming from above, not below.
Did you say
Okay.
what happens with suicide?
Let's get into that in a moment. I'm just going to complete today because some people will have to leave because we've gone 5 minutes over. Okay, and then for those that want to stay, we can answer these questions.
But what will we think with? We won't have any brains.
Yeah, well that was covered in last week's talk.
Oh, sorry.
We come back to Manas mind, which is this one.
Yes.
Our thoughts actually are not created by the brain. Our brain is imprinted with thought. Can you see? So as we think, we create a track in our neurology that becomes reinforced, that then evokes the force of that thought all the time, just like a two-way action. But the origin of it is in a process which is called vritti. Vrittis. And these are very, very fine gossamer web-like substance that envelops the head and penetrates into the brain. And it's really the integrity of the vrittis that give us our thinking processes and our capacity for clean, clear thought, or our capacity for concentration and meditation. It's built on a substance which we talked about in the first talk called chitta.
But not a physical substance.
No, these aren't physical substances, but they're very, very close to physicality because they exist within the feminine energy body. Feminine energy body, which we covered on talk 1. They're made out of a substance called Qing, which is associated with the etheric body. It's produced in the testes and the ovaries.
Right.
And this forms quite dense energy in a way that comprises the structure, you might say, for our thinking. It's like a framework. So the Qing, as it were, is a foundation upon which the vrittis operate. Yeah? Upon which the vrittis operate. So they operate within the environment of Qing, a bit like fish operate within the environment of the ocean. Or birds operate within the environment of the air. So vrittis or thoughts operate within the environment of Qing. And the Qing really is a substance, like I said, it's created by our etheric body. But the vrittis, our thoughts, basically are independent of the brain. So quite often what's a surprise to a recently departed individual is they feel and they think much the same as they did when they were on earth, because much of their core samskaras and much of their vrittis or thinking is still in place. That's not relinquished until they get much higher up the levels. So yeah,
what shatters what you described as sort of shattering?
there is a large amount of shattering, but a lot of the core egoic elements will remain within us. Yeah.
And this experience of, in a physical level of psychosis or schizophrenia,
Yeah.
If that process happens when you're not in a body, is that still possible? That experience?
No, well, that process will. That is the
just
process that
related to
happens.
physical?
Yeah, it's only while you're in the physical, because your astral body will shatter at the time of death, which is what happens really to some degree in psychosis and schizophrenia while you're still alive. In a way, it's a more advanced state. In a way, it's more elevated, and they have more access to the higher realms and other dimensions. But to be honest, quite often what I find, from my experience anyway, is they tend to tune into the lower astral. They tend to be, we've got two here, sorry. They tend to tune into what's going on here on the earth and below.
Is it because it activates so much fear?
Yeah, it's because the fear and the shock and the terror of what they're experiencing. But some of them are actually some of them are able to access these realms as well, and they see like Jesus and Buddha and Muhammad, and they feel like they're on a special mission from these guys, because they're also feeling the light also penetrating into their astral, but now they've got gaps and holes where there were previously samskaras. You see, so that love energy comes pouring through from time to time. So in a way, it's a more elevated state, and they can feel euphoric, and they can feel elevated and blissed out even, and in tune with the astral realities. But all they've really done is they've created splits, tears, and openings. Or some scars have completely broken away, which have left pockets really where that light of heaven can shine through. But they haven't relinquished their conditioning here on earth. They're still very much in their physical body, with their physical life, having, you might say, an astral type of experience. But then what also happens with that is there's a great disturbance in the Qing, in the chitta rather, here in the brain. And the vrittis become disorganized, so their thinking loses integrity. They can no longer make sense of what's happening to them. And you'll see this with schizophrenics and people like this, is that they're completely confused about what's real, what's not real, and they're trying to piece it all together, and what they come up with is incredible. Sometimes how they reassemble all this and make it into this picture, because of what they're experiencing at the astral level. They try and make sense of it, and reorganizes their chitta, but into a disorganized shape, where their thoughts really are quite distorted and quite perverse, based upon their experiences of the astral world. So then they go off into all these beliefs about, there's conspiracy theories, and there's these guys after me, and there's this, and there's that, and there's the other. All this is happening within them.
And the medicine that the doctor prescribes shatters.
No, it doesn't. It separates the astral from the etheric.
Oh.
So actually it disconnects them from physical incarnation, which gives them some peace.
Mm.
Because all this is going on in the astral vehicle. Can you see? And therefore, if you distance the astral vehicle from the central nervous system, the feeling of that is not coming through so easily. So it blocks off that sensitivity. But the ultimate cure for this is to actually come back into one's center and to become more enlightened. So separating the astral from the physical is actually making it harder for you to connect with your own light, which is beyond the astral and the mental and the causal realms. It separates the causal as well, you might say. It takes it off with the astral.
So how would somebody stabilise their energy so that they can move?
With a lot of support. A lot of support.
Do you mean what, any particular practices? Or?
Well, I think they need to go very gently with consciousness practices. And also they need to do a lot of work in the energy field. So it's the masculine and the feminine working together. Unfortunately, we don't tend to do that. We tend to work mostly with the feminine energy, particularly with pharmaceutical drugs, which are part of the feminine energy, material world, in terms of chemical effects. But what we really want is for their astral body to come more in. But to do that while they're in a state of trauma, in terms of what they're experiencing on the astral, will bring that trauma closer. Can you see?
Yes.
And it would make it more amplified and stronger within them. So that's a really difficult one. And that's why a lot of this can take quite a lot of time, because they need to take small steps, but progressively small steps with support and help. And meditative practices as well as energy work need to be done together as a package. But we totally in the Western world miss out on the consciousness component. We tend to just focus on pharmaceuticals and energy work, which will help to some degree. At least it will stabilise the individual, and I would say for some people it may be completely necessary. Without that, they could just go completely mad. And that at least gives them some sense of normality by which they can function to some degree. And then from there, they can then progress with the work, slowly but surely, with support and help. And eventually then come off the pharmaceutical drugs as they actually do authentically become more enlightened.
Yes.
Because the enlightenment process itself will shed you of some scars. But that's an organic, natural lightening of the load that feels blissful, ecstatic and wonderful while you're doing it. Because you're opening progressively to higher and higher realms of consciousness in that way. But my experiences with psychosis is they tend to go down. They tend to go into the realms of darkness, and they hear voices and they see things in the dark realms mostly, because they're the most closely associated vibrationally with this realm. Yeah.
And bipolar, how's that?
Oh, we're all bipolar. Bipolar are just very, very entrenched samskars.
Yeah.
Remember from the second talk, samskars operate in a bipolar way. And basically one expression or the other expression is just two sides of the flipped coin of a samskar. And a samskar can always flip, and usually does. So love turns to hate. You know, it's like...
But they experience really elevated blissful states as well.
They
Is
will.
that a window to a truth?
Well, no, that's the light of heaven shining through. That is, their fragmented astral body is allowing the light in, so they're experiencing the bliss, you might say. There's naturally there. But that in itself then can exacerbate the shadow even more. You see, because when the light of heaven comes in, it fragments the astral body even more, because that's an incredibly high frequency. A causal body, let's say, light. So when that enters into the astral body, which is of a very dense, heavy, low frequency, it's like taking a very to something that's just doing. So light comes in, and that starts to so more and more fragmenting of the astral can take place, with that high frequency constantly penetrating into our samskaras. So we have to stabilise that, and that's where sometimes a removal or a separation through pharmaceuticals can be very, very good. Because it gives relief, it gives a little bit of peace and a little bit of sanity by which they can then tackle it.
Yeah.
And not bringing it in all at once.
Something else to shift again.
Yeah, things will shift and things will move, but it needs to be done in a way where they can feel safe and then they're in control. Sort of the meditative practices we do, which are based on ancient teachings and practices, you're in complete control. I mean 100%. At any point if you see something you don't like or you don't want to experience, you can actually go, okay, I'll just stop for a day or two. You know, it's like, you know, you're totally in control of that.
Mm.
Whereas there are a lot of processes which you don't have any control over, which just open you up in that way.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of at the mercy of that, or you have to see how you deal with that while you're in that space, which can be very challenging for some people.
It's like the madness and you wanting to go into suicide, because that can then often come out of that completely mad
Yeah.
state, because
Well, you're
you
just so
have
distressed
cracked
all
the
the time.
veil that
Yeah.
you're like, well, there's no difference anymore between this and that reality, you know.
Yeah.
But what happens on a samskaric level with suicide? Because is that a
Oh yeah, suicide, that's what you were
samskara
asking about, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Suicide, yeah, okay.
Yeah, my question too.
There's two subjects here. There's suicide and there's also sudden death or accidental death.
Yeah.
So let's deal with suicide first. Well, just very quickly, what happens with suicide is that the astral body will basically go through the death process as I described, but much of the heavier, denser elements will not be released. So the kundalini will rise very quickly, hardly notice. The cord will be broken, they'll be severed from physical incarnation, but the astral elements that prompted them and propelled them towards committing suicide will not be released. And that will then take them down into the lower astral, because there are heavier elements within their astral body. They will need to clean that and do the work of cleaning that in the lower astral before they can rise up. Because whatever it is, as I say, that drew them into that, which will be samskars, one or more, usually more, that made them feel so distressed.
But you said that also that some samskars will come back with you into another life.
Yes,
That haven't been cleared.
yes.
So if you've committed suicide because of this and you go down, presumably you still keep some of those.
Yes, you can do. The core samskaras
Yes.
you will keep from life to life. Yeah.
So don't get lost. I thought that when we went through from the astral into the causal that we cleared it, and then in the causal we clear it.
We are clear of
So
all of
when
that.
we hold those other samskars
Yeah,
from
there is an
that
exception.
come back with Imrida.
Yeah, there's an exception, yeah. Some of the core samskaras are so deep and so tenacious they actually protect themselves from light and high frequency. And they really become like a seed or a blemish, you might say, on the causal body. They're just tiny, they're not active, and you don't feel them when you're in Devashan, in heaven. You don't feel them, you're not aware of them. But they become reactivated usually about the time when our solar plexus center is opened in our teen years, and our astral body is starting to integrate into the physical. So usually about that time, these core samskaras start to awaken within us, and they're fully awake and fully on board by the time we're 28.
So you said sudden death was different.
Sudden death,
So
yeah.
it's
Well,
just
there's
the other side
yeah,
of
there's
that.
suicide, sudden death, and children. Actually, is another thing that's
Oh,
quite
right.
interesting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Mm.
I don't want to be talking all night, but yeah, you got to go, Libertad?
No.
Okay, so you're grabbing your coat.
Well,
Let's quickly cover. So that's suicide. So you understand about suicide. Obviously, there's a heavy samskar, a heavy load of samskar that would have driven a person to that place.
Yeah.
Those samskars remain with them after the death of the physical body. They can't go back, but they will then usually descend into a lower level of existence, astrally speaking, for them to clean whatever it was that impelled them there in the first place. Yeah, so they have to deal with that. They can't run away from it. And actually, when we're in the lower levels of existence, those feelings are more acute, and that, you know, it's more intense.
Yes.
Then when we're on
not
physical
escaping from it.
Yeah, so not even not
It's
escape from it.
actually
It's like
worse.
it's even more. Yeah, it's amplified.
And then you come in and have to deal with it again.
Yeah, so it's harder to deal with it in the lower astral than it is here in physicality.
Like in another life.
Oh yes, no, you will. Yeah, that could well form a core samskara that then will carry through into another existence. Probably is a core samskara.
Yeah,
Probably. Yeah, then you have to unwind that in another life.
yeah.
Yeah. Sudden death, accidental death is not like that. There's a very, very quick transition usually to the plane above the earth, to the fourth subplane of the astral. Let's take this down. So there is a shattering of the astral body that happens very quickly, and then we move on usually very fast to the fourth subplane. Depending upon our energy, we can either go up or down, but that just happens very quickly. There can be a disorientating time with sudden death, where we dwell at this level because we haven't realised we've died. The realisation that hasn't happened, and it's seeming as if everything is just as it was before, and yet people aren't receptive to us, we're not able to communicate or move anything or do things. So after some time of walking around, following people and hanging out in your old workplace or home, you realise after a while that actually this is not quite as it normally is, and something's happened.
How long can it take, that one?
That can take a while, but usually not very long. It's not like it's going to take decades or anything, at least it
Years?
shouldn't.
Years?
No, it can be from minutes
Oh.
to, well actually it can be from minutes to years maybe,
Oh.
yeah. But usually it's in the way of weeks or months.
Oh.
Yeah, you're not normally there, because it's obvious after some time that actually you've died. And you get help and support at this level as well. Guides and helpers will come to your assistance, and you'll be instructed as to what's going on if you're receptive to it. If you're not, they won't come.
Oh.
So that can leave you walking around here for a long time, wondering what's going on. And there are a lot of confused souls, because they just don't realise they've died. Particularly with things like sudden death. If they have a strong attachment to earthly existence, then they will just endeavour at all costs to try and continue with that existence.
Well,
and
with
you
all
just
the
don't
car
understand it.
crashes that there is,
Huh?
there's a lot of car crashes.
Yeah, there are a lot of car
Car
crashes.
deaths.
Yeah, car deaths, yeah, that
So
sort
they
of thing.
must be in there.
Some people are, but you know, for many people they will very quickly realise that they've died and they will move up. Yeah.
Into astral heaven.
Yeah.
Just like that.
Yeah, just like that. Most of us will go straight there. Most of us are not going to go down. If you're involved in consciousness work and you're involved in this kind of thing, you won't be going down probably, unless you're cultivating very strong attachments and desires secretly somewhere. You know, yeah, I mean, you'll be hopefully working on consciousness and elevating your energy as you're going through your human life, so you will go up. Even ordinary people, for the most part, experience going up. You know,
So one
yeah.
I just thought I saw one near-death experience. A guy spoke about going down,
Yeah,
and he crawled around in the sludge
Yeah.
for quite a long time, having a horrible time.
that's right.
At one point, and then he snapped through, and then he was soaring.
And then he was
And
soaring
He
high.
was soaring. He was in
Yeah.
happiness. He was in level 4,
Yeah,
and then he fell, and he came back, and he totally shifted.
yeah.
It's,
So he went down, then he went up.
yeah.
Yeah.
In violent death as well, if somebody had, if say you went through this horrible situation, say
Mm.
being held captive or something, and then died of violent death,
Yeah.
that's going to create some
It
scars
is.
if you're held in that for
It is.
long periods where you
Yeah.
haven't made peace with it or acceptance of
Yeah.
this is Maya.
Yeah, it
So
will
you
create.
would also go down.
Yeah,
from that.
but that'll be a part of the pattern. That'll be a part of your pattern of consciousness from the causal level. You want to experience that kind of death in this life.
Yeah.
More or less, our death is chosen at that higher level. So it's important for us, for karmic release perhaps, that we go through that. And that may well take us briefly into the lower realms while we deal with the violence that's been imposed upon us.
Let's have a look.
But then we'll very quickly release that and then
Maybe
move up.
let's have a look at the lower realms, see what they're like.
To have a look.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe.
Well, I don't think you're very curious, but I think you just will go there because of the
Yeah.
violence that maybe you've been subjected
But
to.
when you say you choose your own death, you know.
Oh yes, yes. Well, all of us have done this many times. I mean, many of us have gone down into these lower astral planes and travelled around there, and maybe still will do. You know, even during the course of a lifetime, we can, you know, still cultivate very heavy conditioning and very heavy desires, even if we're on the path.
Mm.
So we may still go down before we go up,
Yeah.
for a brief time maybe. There's a story in the scriptures about Yudhisthira. He was the emperor of the earth at one time. And he was the most pious being, perhaps, that walked the earth in those days, going back about 5,000 years. And yet he went straight to hell when he died. And it's because he once told a lie. It said in the scriptures, he once told a lie. So he had to experience like 2 minutes of hell. So even someone like that can go down before they go up. So it's always possible. But there's always a choice when we're there, because we can open at any time to light, and it will be there. And then we will elevate and move up. So many accounts of this, there's so many books of people dying, experiencing all kinds of hellish and dark and fearful situations, and then calling for help, and it's there, and they're released. It's a choice.
But what if the help doesn't come?
No, it will come. No, it will come.
I've had this, that's why I keep describing this void. I remember it before
Yeah.
I was born, and when I was little, I was
Yeah.
terrified of falling asleep and staying there and not coming back.
Yeah.
And I remember being just consciousness in this darkness, no love, nothing, but the longing for it, the longing for connection. And I
Yes.
called and called, just wished, longed for some angels, some guide, just some love, nothing. That's why I've started to believe that that was the ultimate reality, that was the truth, that ultimately we burn through everything and there is just
That's
nothing,
part of
not
the journey.
even love.
I've had that experience. I've had this, what I call the kind of, the fear of soul death is the way I describe that experience. That I felt like I would one day be snuffed out and obliterated.
Mm.
And then for 4.5 years maybe, I agonised over that. How could even happen? I just couldn't understand, but I could feel it possible.
Yeah.
But I now know actually that's not the truth. But at the same time, I also was in your situation where you are now, perhaps, I don't know, or where you have been around this, where you feel like actually that's very real. And it's terrifying.
Yeah.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
That is a samskar.
It's the ultimate terror, because
Yeah.
there is nothing beyond that.
No, total annihilation.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a state I didn't get to in this talk because I don't have enough time, called Avicii, which is worse than hell.
Oh.
Yeah, worse than hell. Avicii, yeah, it's a rare state that happens usually around usually around this time in terms of collective evolution, around the middle of what's called the fifth root race, which is where we are now, the Aryan root race. And the analogy here really is one of a classroom. You know, the classroom can go, well, progressively through the years together. You know, your classmates all hanging out together, going through the grades of school. But if there's a certain element, individuals in the class that are actually a disruption and are not learning, then they're holding everybody else back in the class. So there's a point, usually around about now in history, around, like I said, the middle of the fifth root race, which we won't get into now, but we'll get into another time, but it's where we are, that basically says that those souls that are actually holding everybody else back will enter into Avicii. And Avicii really is the void. It means standing wave. There is no connection with the Logos at that point, no connection with God, there's no connection with life. It's complete emptiness, the void, and it's worse than hell, because at least in hell you've got something. And you're in a process of purging and purification. So there's a progression there. In Avicii it's just a standing still. It's a stasis, and there's no time, there's no space, it's just emptiness. You know, and it's described as the ultimate in terms of hellish experiences. The reason why they have to remain there is they're waiting for the first root race to enter into the stage of life again, the next round of human consciousness.
Forever.
No,
Right.
no.
It feels like that, that's part of
Yeah.
the illusion. But
Well, there's
then
no time, it
obviously
can't
you
feel like that. Yeah.
You emerge again into life in some form.
Yeah, so they come back again in the next, what's called Manvantara. Remember we were describing the Pralayas and Manvantaras. So this was the rest periods and the sleeping periods in terms of how the absolute manifests and then withdraws the manifestation. So the manifestation is called the Manvantara. It's like the breathing out. And then the Pralaya is the rest period, that's the breathing in. This doesn't apply to the higher dimensions above here. Yeah, that's just manifesting reality here. So during the next Manvantara, these souls that are held in Avicii then rejoin the classroom. But at that point they have an advantage because they have progressed beyond the first grade. Can you see? So then they become the more advanced souls and they're encouraged by that to complete that time. So there is a kind of blessing with it as well. Yeah. But while they're in Avicii, it's a hellish place because it literally means standing wave where there's no emotional feeling of life at all.
And choice.
Well, you can make a choice, but you won't be able to exercise anything around it because there's just nothing, nowhere to go and nothing to do.
It's worse than total annihilation because then you realise that our old concept of death, of total loss of consciousness, just gone, is much better because you would not feel anything. You would be better. Yeah.
Well, the other thing to be aware of here is that when we eventually get back to the causal body and this body is eventually resolved, we then become the soul nature. But the difference was from before incarnations, before creating a causal body, is that we're fully aware, we're fully conscious. Whereas on the way down we were not. we're coming into mineral, plant, animal, and then with a causal body, human life, where we then started really with human life on a journey of self-discovery and self-realization. And when that's complete, the causal body is wound up, and then we are fully awake. Can you see? In terms of what we've harvested from our physical experiences here over many, many incarnations. Yeah? But when we come here, it's described that we still are individuals. So what happens there is separation is completely lost, not individuality. So the ancients described this as a circle with its centre everywhere, but its circumference nowhere. It's that Chintabedra Beta Tattva scenario again, where you're simultaneously one and different. So the centre of your consciousness is everywhere, because you are everything in everybody at once, because you are one with everything. And yet you're individual, so there is a centre, but there's no circumference, because you can't define where you really begin and end. So the centre is everywhere, but the circumference is nowhere. But you don't lose individuality, and yet you have that sense of being one with everything, including the other people.
It's not always a blissful state, though.
No, well, at that level it is. It's just if you come down here, it's not. Yeah, but here it's beautiful and blissful. Yeah. But these really are realms of rest and process and recuperation on our journey back to causal. You know, they're resting, process, all of that. This really is the work level. These levels are actually dynamic and active beyond belief. Everything we're doing down here in the mental, emotional, physical realms is considered to be rest by comparison. This is where we start to get busy. At the manasic, buddhic and atmic levels, the soul, because that's when we start to create. And we are then consciously creating planets, systems, life forms, down at these lower planes of existence. That's where all this creation comes from. It comes from here.
And some of these
it's a big job.
souls who've arrived there, do they incarnate the earth just to be helpful? You know, like they're having
Yes.
and bodhisattvas.
Yes,
so
they forego this.
They come. They don't actually have karma, but they
No.
come here to.
That's exactly right, Chrissy, yeah. That's exactly right. They forego the Buddhic and Atmic realms and come to the earth out of compassion.
What happens in the case of a stillborn baby?
Well, that's a soul that's made a choice to incarnate, that's attached itself to the fetus, and then something's changed here on earth, or something's changed there, and the connection's been broken. And you get a stillborn. That is not a physical incarnation. That hasn't happened.
Even if it was alive?
For a few minutes?
Yeah, a few minutes.
Yeah, that is like a soul wanting to just touch the hem of physicality. Just briefly. And possibly a very, very new soul, maybe the first incarnation. It just wanted to get a glimpse of what it was like to have a physical senses, or a physical body, or a sense of what it is to be in a body, you know, and all of that. But don't forget, to get here, they've got to go through the mental and astral planes. So maybe a big part of their journey doing that, and the physical side was just, actually, that doesn't interest me that much. But they've had to go towards physicality to experience everything else. Or it may be that they just wanted to experience this place very, very briefly before they had to move on. Some karma that they had to work through, that they just worked through for the first few hours, days or weeks of their life, and that was done. But there was no real intention to that incarnation other than to maybe clean karma.
Yeah, that could also be connected to the parents of that.
Ah, your parents' karma, absolutely
That
right.
could be-
Yeah, to give them an experience, absolutely, well done, yeah.
Service.
Yeah, the service to them. I see my daughter like that sometimes. You know, I sometimes wonder, God, is she here to do anything? I mean, I think she's maybe just here to do stuff for me, maybe, to help me. It's like she's come in service, you know. Amazing. Yeah.
And when does the spirit arrive then? At what point?
At the moment of birth.
It arrives at the moment of birth.
Well, you have 3 steps in the process. You have the causal body sends out a projection, which becomes the mental body. So, shall I go into this in a bit more detail? Do you want to hang out for another 5 minutes? Yeah? Okay. So the causal body, we send out a projection of our consciousness, which then procures an atom at the mental level. This is called the mental seed atom. This atom is programmed with the vibration of your mental body from your previous life. so it carries forward. It's put into a single atom on the mental plane. This atom on the mental plane then vibrates to that frequency. Yeah, that's coming in through this filament of light into that atom. That atom then attracts similar atoms from the mental plane, and that creates a sheath or a body around that atom. Can you see? Sheath or a plane. That's all those atoms are attracted to that atom, and eventually you have a body, what's called a kosha in Sanskrit. Here you have it here. You're basically creating what's called the Manomaya kosha. It's a sheath or a body that's around the atom. Then from that atom there's another filament that then extends into the astral plane and acquires another atom. Just one atom. It attaches to it. And then that impulse is then sent into that atom that makes that astral atom then vibrate, that then correspondingly attracts astral substance to that atom, that then constructs the astral body, the same vibratory astral body as in your previous incarnation. Can you see? Because it's coming from the causal plane. Then that atom then sends another filament down into the physical body, which then becomes what's called the physical seed atom, which is in the center of our heart. And that anchors the consciousness into physical life. So the soul is anchored in the heart. Yeah? But, in a way, it kind of happens in reverse when we're coming here. So the activation of those atoms, so these atoms are acquired, and then the physical seed atom is activated. When that is activated, you get in the womb what's called a quickening. It's usually around about 3 months, where life force energy pours into the developing fetus, and you get an embryo, and very, very quickly that structure, that physical body is then created. Yeah? The astral body then, the astral mechanism usually then comes in sort of around about, well, near the end of pregnancy. That's when you start to, the baby's getting impressions. It's starting to feel through the astral mechanisms and through the physical senses as it's attaching itself to the primitive nervous system. So its astrality is starting to waken up. It's starting to become sensate, aware at the feeling level, and it starts to respond to its environment. And at the moment of birth, the mental seed atom enters, and that's consciousness in terms of mind and awareness, reflectivity. So you couldn't say it's like it's, you know, your causal body just goes plonk.
No.
You know, physical seed atom, emotional seed atom, mental seed atom.
So before 3 months, the miscarriage has just been purely a physical.
Yeah, it's just a physical thing, yeah.
Because I always
Yeah.
thought at that point maybe there was a soul wanting to just have a short womb experience.
Yeah,
So
there might be, and there might have been some interest from those planes as to this potential, but there's no real affiliation.
Yeah.
So by the time that's, it's no problem. They just go and choose another that hopefully will go full term.
Yeah.
Yes, because most women won't sort of announce a birth before 3 months, will they? Because it can or it may happen, it may not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's at that time that the
Yeah.
fetus separates from the uterine lining, and you develop a
Corpus luteum changes, and they switch from corpus luteum to the placenta, and
Yes,
that's where a
you
lot
develop
of
all of
women
that.
Yeah.
miscarry.
Yeah.
In
That's
that
it.
transition, because there can be a gap that's too, on the physical level, it can be a gap where the embryo doesn't make the transition
The connection.
to fetus.
Yeah.
It doesn't make that transition from embryo to fetus.
Okay. Yeah.
And the shifting of the life support.
Yeah. 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 Children, they tend to go straight to astral heaven, and they tend to move very quickly up to the causal body, and then redesign a new life. They have very little baggage, and they don't have hardly any mental constructs to get in the way. So very, very quickly they go up, and they just continue to go very quickly. Very short visits usually through the astral and mental planes, and then they're back to their causal self, their actual self, to design a new life.
You hear from mediums that they kind of grow up in spirit, they're supported to kind of grow up in
Yeah, well, they may do.
experience of adulthood.
Yeah, they may need to do that as well. Yeah. But it'll be a much shorter sojourn than for us. Some souls can take hundreds of years to go. So, a short time in the astral, maybe 10, 20, 30 years. So in that time you would go up a little. Yeah. You would mature according to the level that you're at and grow accordingly. Very different from Earth. Probably a lot quicker. Yeah. Yeah. So very quickly you would grow up, I would assume. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Yes.
Our experience of falling in love, this, you know, you hear, oh, it's just such physical experience, but those experiences of bliss, of the heart opening, the pure aspect of it, aside from the human baggage you bring out in each other, I mean, again, is that a way of bringing each other home?
It is.
Part of that.
Yeah, you're mirroring each other, so you're helping each other clear samskaras. That love connection and that feeling of love is the higher natures connecting, and that feeling of unity with somebody else through that connection, which is love, right? But what that will do, and what it always does, and this is where most couples get completely snagged, you are bringing in more light, because you're connecting through that love connection, which is light, right? That will start to unwind and activate and break up samskars. So it'll expose the shadow. That shadow will become much more ferocious and fierce, say, than the way if you were just on your own, through the dynamic of that connection. But our problem as human beings is we go, it's your fault. But actually that person is doing you a massive favour, illuminating and bringing to the surface your samskars, or those aspects of you which are in shadow that need to be clear. So that's why relationships are the hardest thing. And yet the best thing, really, if you can stand them.
You understand what's going on.
Yeah, especially if you've got a very close match and there's a real love connection. And that feeling is just so powerful, it will really awaken very deep stuff, like nothing. You know, and that's heaven and hell, isn't it? I mean, but that's the journey. And I think anyone's very naive if they think they're going to go into a relationship and never experience any of their shadow side. It's just all going to be love and light, you know. That's just yes. For a while it is, but things will be activated and things will be churned. And particularly that love light will expose a lot. Yeah, that's why it's best not to be in relationships if you don't want to experience a lot of emotional hurt. But it's mostly men, actually, rather than women, that run away from that. Because they don't know how to deal with the astral release and those astral mechanisms unwinding.
But you can't escape it, can you?
No, they'll just find it again in the next relationship.
You're going to experience it, you know, like with the suicide thing, it's going to get amplified.
Yeah, exactly.
Another way.
But maybe they won't experience it so much, because a lot of people choose people that they're not really that in love with, they're just in a relationship.
They're doing a little orbit around each other at a safe distance, aren't they, the whole time?
Which is very
Which is a comfortable, cosy, okay sort of scenario. And my mother was like that with her ex-partner. They're just very much relating through their samskaras. And that's it, they're just stuck there. They're not really allowing more light or encouraging light or consciousness or higher understanding to come through. So there's no real pressure on our astral samskaras because of that.
So you're kind of alone in the...
Yeah, but they suffer. They suffer. They're suffering. And they don't realise they're suffering. This is the thing. But what they do is they turn to alcohol, they turn to all kinds of distraction, TV, the media, you know, and they do it in other ways. You know, they try and mitigate that suffering through behaviour and through addictions and compulsions and all that sort of stuff. My mother eventually, you know, she became like drawn to alcohol and got into alcohol as a way of numbing out.
And the ultimate fear then of losing each other, if you've had a deep love, is again a samskara.
Well, it's triggering that core samskara of separation and loss,
Yes.
which is always the samskara we feel when we separate from someone. Because that definitely will be activated. Yeah, so we dread losing a connection or a loved one because we know we're going to feel that. We better stop there. Yeah. Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.